You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now. Welcome to 535. I'm Mariana Sotomayor, Capitol Hill correspondent for Puck News. It is Wednesday, July 22nd, and possibly in 24 hours or less, the House is going to recess for August, and campaign season is going to begin in earnest. There's a lot of things that House Republicans are trying to get done, not to mention the Senate as well, so stay tuned. We'll be talking to a number of lawmakers. One thing to note, since 535 kicked off in May, we're getting really close to interviewing 100 lawmakers. Today, joining me now is our 92nd lawmaker making his debut on the show, Congressman David Valadao, Republican from California, who's also joined by Evan Davis. He's the Director of Government Affairs for the International Association of Firefighters. Thank you both for coming and talking about a very important subject that obviously affects your home state quite often, unfortunately, and that is, of course, these mega fires that we're seeing happen not just once a year, but it feels more common. And for all of us over here on the East Coast who may not always get as many fires as you guys do, I mean, we can just talk about how last week a lot of us were told to stay indoors. It really felt for all of you on the West Coast. So let's talk about this bill. It's bipartisan with Congressman Josh Harder, Democrat from California. Tell me a little bit about it, and where are you all in that legislative process to make sure it can become law?
I mean, we want the bill to move, and ultimately that's one of the frustrations we have with working in Washington is getting our legislation to move. But this legislation is bipartisan, like you mentioned. It's important, and our goal is to try to get something simple to help our firefighters be more properly trained to fight fires, but also have safer equipment so that they have the ability to fight fires knowing that it's not going to have a lasting impact on their health. And there's a lot to address here. The comment you made the other day, though, about last week's fires, those were a taste of what we have to deal with in California. I've had years flying into California where as I'm coming down into the Fresno airport, it's like flying through a yellow, just dark cloud.
I can't imagine.
The air quality is horrible. It's going to have lasting impact on people's health. So this is something that is not necessarily exactly focused on my district because we don't actually have those fires, but those fires that hit the state of California just pollute our air and have a devastating impact on our health. And so it is something that we need to address.
Yeah, and Evan, obviously the IAFF is pushing for a number of different priorities. How long have you all been working with the congressman here? And are you all really, what are your avenues to make sure that this does become law? Are you talking to the White House, also obviously advocating up here to try and get this done?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been working with Congressman Valadao for a number of years now on trying to address this, as well as a few other champions in Congress. The White House has been very receptive to our concerns. You know, it really goes to the issue that wildfire is so much more than just a sporadic issue here or there. It's something we're seeing really across the entire country. As we speak today, there's about 140 fires burning nationwide. We've got fires everywhere from California, Oregon, the Carolinas, up in the Midwest. And so it's something we really need to take a whole of nation look at to make sure our firefighters are prepared wherever they might be to protect their communities.
You both mentioned how this is something that you've been pushing for to get done. Do you think this is something that could be adopted before the end of the year? Obviously, August recess right around the corner. There's only a couple weeks left, a lot of priorities to possibly get done, but this is kind of front of mind for a number of you.
I feel like it should be front of mind. Obviously there's a lot going on, limited amount of time, and Washington right now is pretty well divided. Going into an election cycle, especially we're 104 days out from Election Day, it is a difficult task for us to get it done before, but we also have a lame duck at the end Hopefully the opportunity, if we don't get it done before, will happen. But I would hope that the majority of the lawmakers here that we deal with understand the importance of making sure that our firefighters have the ability, proper training, and have the tools necessary to protect themselves and also protect our communities.
This shouldn't necessarily be a political issue, right? I mean, especially, unfortunately, because so many of us are experiencing this now more often, right?
It should be an easy topic. And again, this is one that properly training our firefighters, the ones that work on structural fire, to go in and fight wildfires so that they know how to address it. Working with the USDA, who manages the most forest lands, so that they're a center point in communicating with our locals, our state, and other federal agencies, so they know who's in charge and what's going on and how to fight those fires properly. And then also making sure that we're testing all the equipment that our firefighters use and adapting the equipment so that it works to protect our firefighters' health moving forward, so they're not afraid to fight fires on our behalf.
Right. Okay, so let's dig into this bill a little bit. One part that was interesting is that it creates a brand new position, the Undersecretary of Agriculture for Fire Coordination. The question is to both of you, why do you need to create this new role, right? Because you do have FEMA, right? Why not put it under FEMA? Or why not under the U.S. Forest Service? Why does it have to be its own position?
Well, USDA manages a lot of the forest lands. In California, they manage the majority of them. And so having them in charge and at the center of this, I feel, is probably the most important role right there. And communicating with our locals, especially some of our counties, some of our state partners, having them all in one spot, knowing that there's one person, one point of contact, I think is a good start for us to start to address these at a much broader approach.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I'd say it also reflects the changing nature of what we're seeing in wildfire today. For so many years, wildfires have been this remote rural area issue that impacts forest land, and what we've seen from Lahaina to Los Angeles to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, is that there's much more of an interplay with local firefighters now. And what we're seeing is as these fires spread out of the wildland-urban interface and into populated communities, more and more local municipal firefighters are being put on the front lines to protect their communities, and making sure the Department of Agriculture has that interface with local governments to kind of have that hand-in-hand transition of responsibilities from the Forest Service to local firefighters is key.
Okay. The other part that caught my eye in this piece of legislation is, the fun thing about doing this show and digging into bills is there's a lot of things that we don't realize in the day-to-day of covering Congress and all of that. And one of it is the fact that there are over 1,000 Department of Defense firefighters who are currently sidelined. And, when you're in a place where you have to fight these mega fires, and we've seen how some of these fires don't just get put out in a matter of days, how would this bill address that? And why are these firefighters just getting sidelined, can't be deployed right away?
I think there's two issues going on there. One is they're not being reimbursed sometimes, and so the Department of Defense will hold back on them, and others, this actually directs them to release those guys, and then it requires that they help fight fires, but it also requires that the agencies reimburse the Department of Defense for their time and effort. And that's one of the issues that we deal with at many different levels. My county guys, my city guys, when firefighters end up going to fight fires, they're being reimbursed and trying to cover the cost of those firefighters or the equipment they're sending on their behalf.
Yeah, I mean, really, when firefighters take an oath to protect and serve their communities, they just want to be able to do their jobs. And our federal firefighters are so hamstrung by the bureaucracy that prevents them from leaving the base, whether it's for a wildfire or oftentimes other emergencies as well. And so being able to cut that red tape and just bring common sense to emergency response policy is going to be incredibly helpful for unleashing the resources that are already there before we even get to creating new resources.
Another part of this bill also addresses mental health, and that's an interesting conversation that we've had with other members of Congress on other issues. Like last week I was interviewing a bipartisan couple who really wanted to talk about mental health among pilots, for example. And it seems like there is a culture, whether it's law enforcement or even here, where the firefighters, pilots, police officers don't necessarily talk about just the exhaustion that could come with the job. Tell me a little bit about how this bill in particular could address and help a number of firefighters.
Well, having a mental health professional deployed with some of these groups that go out to help fight some of the fires, I think it's an integral role, because some of the things that they see, especially when you look at fires like the Paradise Fire and others that destroyed so much, you want to make sure you're trying to address and take care of our firefighters from every approach, and this is one of those. And as we all know, mental health professionals is something that we desperately need across the board. I would argue a lot in Congress as well, but no, it's something that needs to be addressed, and I think this is one of those roles that could be helpful and should play a vital role in making sure that we're protecting the firefighter from every angle.
Yeah, this issue really came to the forefront for us after the Maui wildfires a few years ago. As part of that response, the Department of Homeland Security sent the Urban Search and Rescue Teams, which are 28 highly specialized teams throughout the country to help in that response and search for victims process. And much as the Congressman said, that process of searching for victims, trying to rescue people, expose them to so many traumatic exposures. And we've generally found when these USAR teams are deploying that they're really going into the worst of the worst conditions. So having them be able to have that resourcing and that mental health training for themselves, as well as to help their brother and sister firefighters or wherever they might be deploying, is going to help stem that tide that we see of PTSD and other mental health issues throughout the fire service.
You mentioned that this is just one part of a very big puzzle, potential reforms to be able to address all of these wildfires and help firefighters. What else would you like to see get done on this front? And no timeline, because there's a lot of things happening, but I mean, again, there's just like so many things that probably need changes, reforms, or you'd like to see get done.
I mean, things like the Save Our Sequoias Act, Save Our Forests Act, that actually help us manage our forests so that we don't get to the point where we're having to fight the fires, but prevent the fires from actually happening would be very helpful. It would help us on so many different fronts. I mean, obviously the Central Valley deals so much on the waterfront, and our forests we are having drier climate now, and we know that's happening. So having our forests with so many trees out there that absorb a little bit of water that does come down has an impact. The forests tend to have trees that are more vulnerable to pests and disease because they do not have the amount of water they need. It just creates an entire problem that makes the fire situation worse. So managing our forests properly the way we used to would help us dramatically on this front as well.
And Evan, what is the IAFF going to continue to push up here?
Yeah, well, one of our top priorities is addressing the training gaps we have for local firefighters when it comes to wildfire response. When we look at municipal urban firefighters, they're phenomenally skilled at building fires, at car fires. But outside of California, most municipal firefighters don't have really any training when it comes to wildfire response. And the challenge we see is our members getting pulled into these responses, whether it's a fire directly coming into a populated area or whether it's a fire encroaching somewhere else. When there's a need for 20 engines at a time, you call the big cities. Makes sense, they have the personnel, they have the staffing. Those personnel don't have the training. And so we're sending these firefighters into situations where they don't have training, and they're encountering a tremendous amount of risk. And for us to continue sending these folks directly into harm's way without training, without the supplies, without the protective equipment they have, is something that critically needs to be addressed to make sure those folks can do their job safely and effectively.
Congressman, since it is your first time at 5:35, we have this very short segment called 5:35 1 minute, so you can't vamp, it's not a magic minute, okay? Just ask you some rapid fire questions. First and foremost, you're a swing district Republican. What are you going to be doing this August? Can't imagine you're going to be bored.
I've got a lot of work to do at home. Obviously, with all the work that we've been doing here in Washington, going back and spending some time at home is good. I try to get home every single weekend, but during the week is when we're able to actually get things done and visit and do all the things that members of Congress need to do. Meet with folks, talk with folks, and see all the things that are going on.
And where is your favorite restaurant in your district? I'm sure there's many. There
are many, and that's the thing, is there's so much good food around the Central Valley, but I did take you to one that is always one of my favorites.
Yes, indeed.
Fish tacos, and it's right there in Pixley, just amazing fish tacos. But we've got a lot of great restaurants all throughout the valley, and I mean, obviously with a large population of Hispanic folks in our community, we have some of the best Mexican food of anywhere.
I would say we bring a lot of seasoning, a lot of spice.
And you come here to D.C. and it's such a disappointment. Anytime you step foot out of California, it's a disappointment when it comes to Mexican food. So we're lucky at home with some of the best Mexican food you can find.
No, for sure. I can't be opinionated about many things, but I can on food, and those fish tacos were pretty good. Yeah. So, who is your favorite member to work with from across the aisle?
That's a tough one because it just depends on the issue. I mean, I've got guys that I've got a great relationship with on committees, like Pete Aguilar. We work together on the appropriation side, but then in just general, I mean, Jim Costa, my neighbor, I work with him quite a bit on water legislation. So just different folks on different issues, but a lot of great members on both sides of the aisle, and we really are lucky. And it sucks because 435 members of Congress, and a lot of people, the 5 to 10 or 20 that spend more time on the news get the most attention. There's so many out there that stay below the radar, do their job, work well across the aisle, and just try to serve the American people.
Well, all of you are welcome to come on our show and talk about policy, dig into the number of your priorities. So thank you so much for coming. And Evan, thank you so much also for talking to us about this very important issue that's affecting a lot of us here in the country. We'll be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News. Today I am talking to a bipartisan duo who is working on permitting reform, as are many members of Congress. But first, today I am joined by California Democrat Scott Peters and Colorado Republican Gabe Evans. You guys are the lead sponsors of the Certain Act, which aims to overhaul and streamline the federal permitting process for energy and infrastructure projects. Let's get into this. Permitting reform, as we were talking about off camera, seems to the topic du jour these days. Right. Everyone has a permitting reform bill. The House in the spring already passed a narrow permitting reform bill. So first of all, let's just do like 30,000 feet. Can you explain to me and to all the thousands of people out there that are watching, what is the difference between the different permitting reforms? You said there were 4 parts.
Well, let's start with why it's important.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's happening in the United States is we're going to see for the first time an increase in the demand for electricity that we have not seen in a long time, because data centers, onshore manufacturing, electrification, and more air conditioning in the Southwest, we need to build a lot more energy. And what we know about the United States is it takes forever to build stuff. Now, why is that? So we have so much process. The bill that you talked about, the SPEED Act, was a reform of the National Environmental Policy Act, which requires environmental analysis before you make a decision. It's the most litigated federal environmental statute. A lot of litigation gets out of it. So for a big project like a power line, it may take 10 years to do that project, but 7 years is process and litigation. We've got to get rid of that. So that's why you want to do permitting reform. So what are the parts of it? One is that reform that the House did already. We've got to reform how we site and plan major transmission lines, which take electrons from Arizona, where they're come out of the sun, to Detroit, where they're used. That's got to happen. The Certain Act would get the administration to stop dragging its foot on renewables, trying to pull plugs on projects it doesn't like, so that every kind of energy has a chance to compete.
How does it do that? How does it force the administration?
Well, first of all, we reinforce that you can't literally pull the plug on something like the Revolution Wind Project, the offshore wind project that was under construction, that the Trump administration tried to say was a national security threat, pulled the permits.
So any project that is already through the process, you just can't kill.
And also, you can't drag your feet on permitting projects. Now, we put timelines on the actual the permitting of, say, a wind project on federal land. Right now, supposedly Secretary Burgum's got to sign off on all 69 steps of that. That can't work. We get rid of that. And then there's also an effort, I think the fourth part of it is, there's an effort to do pipeline reform under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, which basically allows...
Oil and gas pipeline?
Gas pipeline. Basically allows a governor to say there's a clean water issue and stop a pipeline. And people think on the oil and gas industry that's been abused. I would just say, from a climate perspective, the reason I care about this is that we have to make all energy go faster. 90% of the power that wants to be built in the United States that's lined up to be approved is non-emitting renewables. And so if we want to really transition away from dirtier fuel to cleaner fuel, permitting reform is a big part of that. We got to get out of the way.
Okay, so Congressman Evans, we talked about how the House has already passed the NEPA provisions of it to reform that, to make it processed to go through the environmental standards. So can you talk specifically, Congressman Peters talked about the Certain Act. Is that specifically what your joint bill would do, or is there more to it?
Yes, there's actually more to it. Permitting reform is such a broad topic in the House. There's 3 major committees that have jurisdiction, and then there's bits and pieces and random other committees as well. So Scott and I both sit on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We have jurisdiction over things like the EPA, but then you have the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. They have a lot of jurisdiction over linear assets like roads. They have some jurisdiction over pipeline as well. And then you have the Natural Resources Committee, and that's where NEPA lives. And so the first thing that Scott and I did was we put together this bipartisan permitting reform framework, just because no one single bill is going to fix this, just because the bureaucracy around building things in the United States is so broad. Even in Congress, it falls into multiple different committees, and you have multiple different laws: clean air, clean water, NEPA, endangered species. There's so many different things that all intersect over what we colloquially call permitting reform, that makes it more difficult to build things. So the first thing was this bipartisan permitting reform framework. Here are the general things where Republicans and Democrats, we think, can agree to try to move the needle in terms of being able to responsibly build major infrastructure projects faster. And then from that, you get NEPA, talking about how do we reduce the years of litigation for projects. The statistic we were briefed was a major infrastructure project. If it gets sued under NEPA, 80% of the time that project is going to be approved as is. They did the paperwork right the first time. It's just going to take years of litigation to get there. So how do we cut out a lot of that just unnecessary litigation? If 80% of these projects get approved correctly the first time, how do we make that? We want people to have their say. Well, we don't want, as Scott said, projects to be dragged out for 7 years in litigation. Then there's the Certain Act. So my district, Colorado 8, 4% of U.S. crude oil comes out of my district, but 1 in 2 wind generators in the nation are also built in my district. So for me, it doesn't matter whether it's the Biden administration canceling the Keystone Pipeline or some of the hurdles that we're now facing with the deployment of wind projects. If someone goes through all of the effort to jump through all of the different hoops to get a federal permit to build some of these big infrastructure projects that we need, we want to make sure that that permit is durable across administrations. Otherwise, industry and investors, they're never going to be able to invest in a project longer than 4 years at a time if they don't know that their federal permit is going to be durable. And again, this applies to Keystone Pipeline, oil and gas, or wind. We want a level playing field for all safe, affordable, and reliable energy. And the Certain Act is one of the ways that we do that, by making sure that those permits are depoliticized. If you get your federal permit, it's going to be durable across administrations.
Would you guys say, when the issues around permitting reform for several years now have been which types of projects you are approved? During the Biden administration, they tried to do permitting reform at the very end of that administration. It fell apart. There was a lot of disagreement on, if it should prioritize oil and gas or solar, renewables. Now that there's a lot more pressure on the country with energy costs, energy need, and demand, Are those walls starting to come down among both of your colleagues? You're a Republican and you're a Democrat. Are you seeing it more broadly that people are more supportive of an all of the above strategy, and is it enough?
I think so. I mean, as a Democrat, I'm really proud to have voted for the IRA, which was to be the largest down payment on climate action in the history of the world. But I'm embarrassed about how little of it got done because we have so much process. And instead of taking advantage of that moment and getting rid of the process so we could actually take that money out of the bank and put it into the ground and help facilitate a transition to cleaner, it sat in the bank and we lost that opportunity. And now I think we're at a moment where the market, as I said, is bringing us renewables. If you look at what's happening in China, huge amounts of solar. Texas, not known for being a climate hub of climate activity or concern, oil and gas, they're now the biggest producer of solar or wind, and they will be the biggest producer of solar because it makes sense. The market is bringing us that. So I think now an all of the above strategy on the natural works to the benefit of climate advocates like me. It also helps lower costs because the more energy we have to meet the demand, the better chance we'll have to keep costs low. And so now's the time when all of the above makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, what about you as a Republican? What are you seeing from your colleagues? Are people more accepting more often this all above strategy?
I think they are, and I think from the Republican side, what we're seeing is this growing understanding that we're not in a vacuum here in the United States. Just because we don't do something doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It will happen. It's just going to happen in other places like China. And you go look at the carbon footprint that some of our foreign competitors like China produce to make the same equivalent unit of whatever. The fact of the matter is China pollutes orders of magnitude more than the United States does oftentimes to be able to produce the same thing. So if we want to protect the environment, we have to build it here in the United States, and we have to have that all of the above approach as long as it's safe, affordable, and reliable to be able to meet that demand. The number that we continually hear is somewhere around 170 gigawatts. So translating that into normal speak, that's 50 million households worth of energy. And that's what we're going to need in the next 3.5 years.
Yeah.
A natural gas turbine is backlogged due to supply chain issues right now, which also ties into permitting reform. How do we build more things faster? But those are backlogged several years. So we have to have solar. You can get that on the grid in 11 months. Wind, 18 months. We know we need baseload dispatchable energy because on the hottest days and the coldest days, typically the sun isn't shining, the wind's not blowing. And so we have to have baseload dispatchable energy to be able to tide us through those times where sun's not shining, wind's not blowing. And so we really need all of the above energy as long as it meets those three criteria: safe, affordable, reliable, and being able to build that supply chain, being able to build that infrastructure that's what permitting reform is all about. How do we do it responsibly but faster?
Congressman Peters, let's talk about the environmental impact of this.
Yeah.
We were talking about environmental litigators and how it could take years to get a project to go through. What is the right balance? Should the environmental implications be taken into consideration at all when the country needs more energy?
Of course, I think absolutely. What point I'm trying to make is what wants to get built, 90% of the gigawatts in line to get built are renewables. So if you think in the broad sense about what's really good for the environment, it's getting out of the way. It's doing permit reform to get those electrons generated in that way. That just makes sense for the environment. Now, if you're saying, we'll have fewer community meetings, less litigation, I don't think that's really played out in a way that's helped the environment as much as getting out of the way of the development of these renewables will. So I think we sometimes mistake the planning law that NEPA is for environmental protection. We have the Clean Water Act, we have the Clean Air Act. Those are the substantive protections against the emission of pollutants in the environment. I think we have a lot of room to be more flexible about NEPA when we need so much more energy and so much of what wants to get built is clean. That's what's good for the environment.
Congressman Evans, what about you? How much should the environment be taken into consideration? And is the NEPA reform about scaling back so that it is just clean air and clean water, those laws that are being considered when these environmental protection assessments are done?
I think the Supreme Court phrased it best in their unanimous decision, the 7 counties decision, which was a case in between Colorado and Utah. We're speaking specifically to NEPA. They said the point of this law is to inform, not paralyze. And unfortunately, where we're at right now, as Scott has said, is we're paralyzed. It takes years to decades to build the most simple infrastructure. In Colorado, we know we're in the middle of a historic drought, and we know it's very dry anyway, somewhere around 10 to 12 inches of rain a year along Colorado's Front Range. Several million people live there. So water storage is important. We have a dam, a reservoir for water storage for the Denver metro area, existing dam in an existing mountain valley. And that project has been under litigation for 2 decades just to raise the height of the dam. We're not creating a new dam, we're not flooding out any new areas here. We're just making the water go a little bit higher up on the walls of an existing canyon. And for 2 decades, drinking water has been under litigation along the Colorado Front Range. So of course we want to take care of the environment. We need to inform, as the Supreme Court said, but we can't paralyze this because we need water, we need the infrastructure, and again, if we're truly concerned about the environment, we've got to do it here in the United States. I spent 12 years in the U.S. Army. I've been to the Middle East. I've seen how the rest of the world produces energy. And if we're not producing energy here, CBS just did a big story about how the west coast of the United States gets a lot of their energy from the Middle East that then gets refined in East Asia and then gets shipped across the Pacific Ocean to California and the rest of the west coast. Not my conclusion, this was CBS's conclusion. That actually increases the carbon emissions and the carbon footprint if we have to go buy energy from the Middle East, refine it in East Asia, and ship it to the West Coast. Let's just make it here.
Yeah.
We do it cleaner, we do it better, we do it more environmentally and socially responsible. Permitting reform is how we do it responsibly, but we don't gum it up in litigation or process for years to decades.
Yeah, really quickly, Congressman Peters, this Congress is almost done.
Yeah.
We are entering an election. What are the chances, what gossip are you hearing from the Senate that this could potentially be done this year?
I hear the Senate's having really good conversations. They know this is our moment. We've got really good work lined up around all the components of this permit reform. We just need to get them in a room, sign it up, make it into a bill, and I think we got a really good chance this time.
Okay, how's your optimism?
I'm optimistic. I'm hearing the exact same thing, both, obviously here in Congress, but also in my previous life as a state legislator. I've always been a House guy, and so I'm used to waiting on the Senate and trying to read the tea leaves and see what's the Senate going to do. But I share the optimism. I think that we're going to get something meaningful delivered and then across the finish line because we have to do it. This is a matter of national concern. If we don't have the energy and the resources here, we're going to lose ground to China.
And it'll help the environment and help affordability.
Great. Congressman Gabe Evans, thank you so much. Congressman Scott Peters, your second appearance on 535.
I love it here. This is a really comfortable chair. Thank you.
Both of you should come back. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Leanne.
And we will be right back with more policy-focused conversations.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
Here on Capitol Hill, the 535 are in charge, the members of Congress. But in a democracy, in the people's house, you need to be heard as well. So if you have questions, or comments, or ideas, submit them to us at 535.news. Because here with us, the floor is yours.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Brody Mullins here with Faryar Shirzad from Coinbase.
Yep.
We're talking about the most important issue right now on Capitol Hill today and for the next couple of days, the crypto bill. Bring us up to speed.
Well, the next couple of weeks, so after about 5 years of effort, we're finally at the moment that the Senate is going to take up a crypto bill, and we expect pass it before they go into the August recess on Thursday, August 6th. So we expect the Senate bill, for floor consideration to come out this afternoon. Then the process will start and we'll have votes and kind of work our way through
And literally, as we're here on live TV, this bill you think is being circulated to Democrats with
That's my understanding. As I was
language.
walking over here, I heard the copies were being distributed to Democrats as we speak. So we're looking forward to seeing it, going through it, seeing what the details are.
Great. So walk us through the key holding point, sticking points up to right now.
Well, the bill is actually fairly common sense in the sense that it creates a national regulatory framework for how crypto markets operate. So for all the noise around crypto, people think that the bill does something very unusual. It actually does something, kind of does almost basic housekeeping, which is clarifies which agency has regulation over what. There are a few big issues that have been kind of left to work out, some relating to the treatment of exchanges, some relating to the treatment of crypto developers. They're fairly technical, I can talk about them. But the two big issues that are kind of above the industry's pay grade are whether there'll be an ethics provision that the president would agree to, and then whether there'll be some deal worked out on nominations. And we understand on both of those, really important progress has been made.
And the nominations issue has nothing to do with the bill, it's just about...
no, Democrats want to make sure they're Democrats on the CFTC and the
Right.
SEC, and I think they're working something out. But again, that's really
Right.
something.
Now, I
we're
know
not
the Trump
involved in.
ethics issue has nothing to do with you guys also, but it seems like a key holding point. We're going to need the Trump administration and Democrats to agree to some sort of limitations on what a president or someone in the executive branch could do to promote crypto. Is that?
That's right. So the Democrats have been asking for this for over a year. News reporting suggests that the deal was struck, or that the president at least agreed to a package, which I think for a lot of observers, was an open question whether that would happen. And we'll have to all see what the details of it are. Obviously, as industry, it's really kind of not something for us to speak to, but Democrats will have to kind of work it through in terms of deciding what's there. But as I understand it, for the first time in history, we'll have an ethics bill specifically applying to one asset class, specifically mentioning and applying to the President of the United States. That's historic. So I'm hopeful that's enough to clear that element of it and let us get the bill done.
And that means it's something that you would accept. It sounds like it's something that you think is unusual, but
it doesn't relate to us.
Bother you.
I mean, obviously, as a citizen, you would think they would do ethics in the normal course, but really, we defer to the Senate in terms of how they deal with issues like this.
And let's talk about this other key issue on yield. This seemed to have been a holdup for a while. Now it seems like we might have an agreement.
This was settled months ago now. The bill that was passed last year that created a federal regulatory framework around stablecoins allowed third parties to distribute stablecoins, and if you bought a stablecoin from me, I would be able to share some of the returns on you. So it was actually a really good pocketbook issue. The average American would be able to participate in earning some of the interest that or get some of the rewards that are associated with the stablecoin. The banking groups have been worried about that will impact deposits. There have been multiple studies that show that the concern is misplaced, that there's really no impact on deposits. There were some additional restrictions that the Senate agreed to. We're willing to swallow it. As we understand it, that's done at this point, although the banking groups continue to complain.
So, so we had Rob Nichols on yesterday, and he said that all he wanted was some tiny little changes in this provision. He said he wanted a little clarity in the Clarity Act. I suspect those small changes are bigger than he was letting on to.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about time. You mentioned August 6th. As you know, it's been 30 years since you worked in the Senate, but there's so little time on the Senate floor. What do you think the chances are for if there is an agreement, if there's paper out, to then get time on the floor?
Leader Thune, Chairman Scott, Chairman Bozeman, the key players of all express a lot of confidence that they'll be able to get through all the various procedural steps. Brody, as you know, the Senate is a very complicated institution. I used to know the parliamentary stuff quite well, but if you work the time out, there's enough time to get it done.
How long do you think it would take on the floor?
Well, the Genius Act took upwards of 10 days. And so we expect this will take around the same amount of time. The Senate, as you know, is designed for any one member to be able to hold the process up. And so, the benefit of that is whatever ultimately comes out will be a product of genuine compromise. And so we feel pretty good about
Another delay or problem has been the loss of Senator McConnell not being here, losing a Republican vote.
Yeah.
How many Democrats now would you need to get to 60?
Well,
I won't ask you math, sorry.
Yeah.
You need a number of Democrats.
Yeah, so 53 Republicans, if they were all here.
Right.
You might lose one or two for reasons, like almost in every bill you'll lose a couple in the majority. In the House, we got 78 Democrats to join every Republican on the House version of this bill that came over. This is a dramatically enhanced bill in terms of Democratic priorities. So my guess is in the end of the day, we'll probably get 20 plus Democrats to sign on. We need 60 total, so 53 plus 7 would be the math. My guess is at the end you'll get a lot more. The procedural votes, my guess is some of the Democrats will hold their vote back. But I think in the end of the day, the logic of a bill that dramatically enhances consumer protection, law enforcement, U.S. national security, and innovation, I think the logic out of it is hard to argue with, so I think in the end we'll do quite well, but the process is going to be complicated.
So if you get the bill through the Senate, let's say the next, before September, or maybe in September, is there time to then merge these bills, and what would the major holdups be between the House and the Senate?
Yeah, Chairman Hill and other House leaders, as I understand it, have been in pretty close dialogue with their Senate counterparts. Our expectation is the bill that comes out of the House, out of the Senate, in the next couple of weeks, the House will take up and pass, so there won't be a need for a conference. Obviously, we'll see. I mean, this is above my pay grade, but my expectation is they'll take the bill up right when they come back, probably pass it with a very, very even larger bipartisan majority. This will be. I mean, the interesting thing is for all the controversy sometimes that colors some of the coverage around crypto, we were the biggest bipartisan issue of 2025. Along with housing, will be the biggest bipartisan issue probably of 2026. So this is a good news story. It's a good news story for voters, for Democrats, Republicans, and so we're hopeful to be able to help deliver that.
Let's back up then. Can you tell us about the industry and what role Coinbase plays in the industry overall?
So Coinbase is the U.S.'s largest crypto platform. We're one of the largest in the world. For people who don't watch crypto quite closely, crypto fundamentally is a technology that allows you to transmit value, whether it's money, whether it's a financial instrument, as easily as you would transmit a text or an email. People don't realize this, but the financial system, exchanges, custodians, asset managers, broker-dealers are all transitioning their records onto the blockchain to use crypto technology. This legislation creates the framework to allow that to happen. Coinbase is the leading provider, is the leading exchange, but also the leading infrastructure provider for this next generation of the financial system, and it's quite exciting for us.
French Hill, you mentioned, says the Genius Act sort of created the cell phone, and the Clarity Act creates the network. Is that the right way of looking at it?
Yeah, so Genius Act created a regime around stable coins, so you can now pay through tokenized dollars. So rather than sending a message to your bank, waiting 3 days, and having the money moved to the person you intended to go to. You can send the money instantaneously. Stablecoins allow you to do that. But the really interesting innovation is all the various apps that we all use, where you have to type in your credit card or send an ACH message to your bank, wait 3 days for the money to transfer. All of that can be done instantaneously. So you'll have a revamp of the financial system and a revamp of essentially the internet infrastructure using the crypto-based technology to transmit value. Coinbase is the leading infrastructure provider for that, and so we're excited to help build that future. And we're building banks as they integrate this to come to us, to work with us, asset managers and others. So we have a lot of partners in the financial system, even as the Washington folks squabble over legislation. The business folks actually work pretty well together.
So we have sort of a history in this country the last 20 to 30 years. Anytime there's a new technology or a new industry, those companies tend to sort of run away from Washington, want to hide from Washington. Your industry is different. It sort of came to Washington right away to build relationships, to get legislation passed. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase. He created Coinbase in the United States at a time where most crypto developers realized that the regulatory environment here was too complicated and decided to go offshore. Brian doubled down on that when he hired me to help build a real concerted effort to get to this point that we're at, to pass legislation. It's been 5 years of a lot of work for us to get to this point, but all of that has been leaning into the hard questions we get from Democrats, Republicans, progressives, conservatives, skeptics, others who just kind of want to understand how this works. We get hard questions from libertarians who wonder whether any regulation makes sense, and from progressives who don't quite understand the tech. And Brian's view and our view is we have an obligation to meet people where they are, answer their questions, and then ultimately participate in the process so that we can get legislation done.
Now, we live in a great country, obviously. Everyone's got their own personal American story. I'd love to hear a little bit about yours.
Yeah, look, I mean, this country is, I have a hard time talking about this country without tearing up. I mean, my family, my dad was an Iranian diplomat. We had to essentially flee Iran. We were here in the United States at the time of the revolution. My family is a member of a religious minority. This country took us in, allowed us to rebuild our roots, allowed us to live the American dream. I had the privilege of working in the Bush administration. I was Deputy National Security Advisor for International Economics for President George W. Bush. Now I'm working here at Coinbase. There's no other country in the world that would allow a country that's fleeing from persecution to come in and live the American dream than this country has, and I'm grateful for it every day. I'm grateful for it on the 250th anniversary of this country, but every day, and whenever I see the flag, I do kind of tear up to be if I were oversharing.
Faryar Shirzad, Coinbase, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Brody Mullins. We'll be right back on 535.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there, and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we going to do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
Through a wind tunnel.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News. Right now, I am joined by Tennessee Republican Diana Harshbarger. We are going to be digging into some healthcare topics. We're going to talk about you're a pharmacist by profession.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about PBMs.
Yes.
And also a little bit of healthcare fraud.
Okay.
So thank you for joining us, Congresswoman.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Always fun to talk about things that you spent your life doing.
Yeah, so let's talk about PBMs. As a pharmacist, what is your experience with them?
Well, you know, there's a purpose. I was around running the pharmacy when PBMs first started.
Oh.
And you would slide like a credit card machine with a triplicate thing, and you paid a fee for service.
Uh-huh.
Now it's morphed into something totally different, and there's no transparency in what they do, and somebody's getting bankrolled. And when they tell you what you can have and what you can't have, and you go through prior approval, and some people don't get their medication or they substitute it, there's an issue there. In my opinion, the PBMs, and you have three big players out of 80 PBMs that control most of the business, 85% of the PBM business. And they're practicing medicine without a license. And who's going to suffer? It's that little patient that suffers.
So let's take a step back. You said you were around when PBMs started.
Yeah.
So how did they start?
Well, they saw a niche in the market to where, wait a minute, we're going to make it easier for the pharmacist to dispense a drug, and we're going to charge a fee for service. So, what it's morphed into, when you would push that credit card, it's a triplicate form, and you would maybe it may have been $4 or it may have been $1,
Yeah.
and the fee has steadily inclined.
Uh-huh.
But you would mail that in, they would send you your money for the drug, and it was independent of anything.
Why would a pharmacist need help to give a drug, though?
That's the question. You got the insurance carriers involved with that, and they're like, oh, let's make it. Well, how did drug companies start? The pharmacists used to make everything.
Uh-huh.
You would create the capsules, you would create the pills, and they called us druggists, and the doctor would say, this is what's wrong, you fix them. And then pharmaceutical companies like Merck came in and said, let us make this easier. We're going to make this for you, sir, so you can do other things. And the pharmacist said, oh, that's great. That's how your manufacturer started, and it's the same with the PBMs. And the nefarious thing is they've taken the pharmacy benefit manager, and now they have created vision benefit managers, dental managers, to tell them what they're going to charge to have their dental work done or their vision work done. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. When you see something that's profitable like a PBM, just adapt it to your profession, and that's what we're finding now. It's hitting every level and every industry when it comes to healthcare.
That's fascinating. Congress has been trying to do something about PBMs for years.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just this perennial conversation every single Congress, regardless of the administration, regardless of who is in control of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your plan? What would you like to do?
Well, exposure's good for everybody. It's like I tell the PBMs, I don't want to kill you. I just want to mortally wound you to straighten you up to do what you were meant to do, and it be a fee for service. they have morphed into some of the biggest companies with more profit than anybody in the country. And so what you have to do, and you know, here I came into Congress with no political experience, just professional experience in running a business. And what I found out is nothing up here runs like a business. I had no idea you could pick up the phone and call the FTC and say, look, I think it's a great idea if you would do a study on what pharmacy benefit managers do and what they contribute to the healthcare system. And what they found out was the first initial call when they started investigating PBMs is like, since the inception of the FTC, we've never gotten the resistance and the blowback that we have when we tried to question these pharmacy benefit managers. I said, welcome to my world. This is what I've dealt with forever. And most of my time is spent in reconciliation and on the phone trying to get a patient's medication covered. It's not just frustrating to me, it's frustrating to the healthcare provider because they have to switch and we have to get the approval.
Yeah. And
they don't want to show you what they're doing. And you got to remember that one of the big three, United Healthcare, they own 85% of the physician practices in the country. And they also, when you own the physician, you own the pharmacy, you own the specialty pharmacy, the pharmacy benefit manager, and then the clearinghouse. And look, Optum even owns a bank. That's called vertical integration, and that's not good for anybody. And what it does is it stifles innovation and it stifles competition.
Yeah.
And the health insurers, the health providers or self-insured companies, they only know what they're being told on the front end. Use us, we'll save you $1 million, whatever it is. They don't know, they never show you the numbers. And this is why, you know, I told you I want to talk about fraud in the healthcare system. Well, it's just as fraudulent for these people. I'm a capitalist. I'm saying, hey, if you can make money, show me the model and let's make sure you're doing it properly. Transparency, but we don't have that. That's why there's fraud in every part of the healthcare system.
Yeah.
Not to mention everything else up here. But when you expose it, they're going to have to do something about it if we hold them accountable. And that's what we're doing.
Okay, so I'll get to fraud in a second. On the PBMs, you said you need to kind of rein them in.
Yeah.
How does your legislation do that?
Well, for example, the Pharmacists Fights Back. That is a bipartisan. Jake Auchincloss from Massachusetts and myself. That is a bill that we've said, look, let's have some transparency. Let's use one reimbursement system, the NADAC, and let's stop this where you have to. They also will steer patients to their organization. You might be able to fill it at an independent pharmacy or wherever the first time or two, and then they steer you to their PBM, which is, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. It takes away from those independent pharmacies, and you'll have one close every day. I could tell you the thousands that have closed over the last 5 years or more.
Oh, yeah.
And look, we are a provider. We are direct care. Most people live 5 minutes from a pharmacy. Mm-hmm. You don't have to make an appointment. You walk in and we triage you right there. And now you have pharmacy deserts, just like you do grocery deserts, just like you do physician deserts, because of the vertical integration. They want to mail order everything.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like to talk to your pharmacist about what you're getting before you get it so you know everything about it? Of course you would.
On the issue of fraud, it's a big topic, so let's narrow it down a little bit. Yeah. What do you think that the most important thing when it comes to fraud in healthcare is to tackle?
It's just that we need to have oversight on these agencies. Medicaid, Medicare, people worry about it not being here for them when they need it. Well, it won't be. You know, it'll be insolvent by 2035. You have to go in and look at the fraud. People will defraud anything, like DME, the durable medical equipment. Let me go back to what they just uncovered with CMS about the hospices in California. Mm-hmm. You know, and to break it down, I was just at a meeting with our chairman of Energy and Commerce, Brett Guthrie, and Dr. Oz at CMS. You know, simply put, and healthcare's complicated. And I told them, I said, you have to talk, and it's not degrading for me to say this, I'm not being derogatory, but you have to talk on a 6th grade level for people to understand that, because it is massive. And when you do that, not only do people in the American public understand, other members. I have to talk like that to other members because it is so complicated. But if you have somebody, if 1/3 of the hospices in California happen to be in Los Angeles, and they're like, wait a minute, how do we know that these are legitimate hospices? 1/3 of the hospices in the country are in one state, in one county. And they said, let's just cut the payments off and see if anybody complains. Out of 400 or so hospices, 12 complained. What does that tell you? There's a lot of cancer in Los Angeles, or somebody's defrauding the federal government.
Yeah, so is fraud a bigger problem with healthcare consumers or healthcare providers? Because a lot of time in the environment, it gets perceived that it's the consumers who are the ones who are committing fraud against the government. Is it more that, or is it the providers?
Anybody. Well, look, you can have fraud on either way, but if you have to register as a provider, there's things that you have to do. But if people find the loophole, like the durable medical equipment providers, who was the guy from Haiti that defrauded $58 million and had a $2.5 million mansion, all these nice cars? He wasn't even from the country. And they figured out a system to be able to get that license to go ahead and bill fraudulent claims of patients that do not exist. You can make anything up if you want to. He could have been a consumer. Who knows what he was? And he could have been a provider. If there's no oversight, people are going to take advantage of that, and that's the whole thing. You need to check up on these providers. Why are you issuing licenses to people that you don't check to verify that they are a healthcare provider? So it could be either one, but some people are signed up for these programs and they don't even know they're signed up.
Does there need to be more oversight in the federal government? Does that mean that there needs to be more people working in the federal government to do this oversight?
Well, look, I ran a very lean operation for 30-some years, 30-plus years. It doesn't take a lot of people. You just have to be very accurate in what you're looking for. And we have tools like AI that can go in and be a very lucrative tool to help fight the fraud. You know, there's going to be telltale signs in anything, just like they stopped payment. How simple was that? And only had 12 hospices complain. There's your sign. And, you know, AI is going to be a useful tool. We're looking at that in committee. How can that help in the healthcare industry with so many ways, and even with the FDA, even in approving new innovations. There's a lot of ways you can do it. It doesn't mean you have to hire more people. You work smarter, not harder, and so you don't need a lot of employees to do what a simple program can do to just show the fraud. You know, I put a lot of structure into even my office in D.C. and my district offices. I'm like, you have one person over it. If you've got a problem, you go to that person. That person's responsible to double check casework, for example. I want them to monitor the casework. It's kind of like, you know, you have to let somebody know you're checking. If you don't, they run rapid. If they think you're checking, they're going to think twice about that. It's kind of like having a lock on your door. Why do you have that lock on your door? It's not for regular people. It's for people who would, you know, if you twist a doorknob and they're not there, you're going to leave. But somebody who wants to commit a crime, they're going to do it no matter what. And we have to have safeguards and guardrails in place to where it's a lot harder for them to commit the fraud in the first place. And man, if they just ran this place like a business and had the parameters that most businesses do, we probably wouldn't have this problem.
Great. Congressman Harshbarger, you are 535's 94th member to come on our very young show of just a couple months. So congratulations. We're going to reach 100 members this week.
Yay. Okay.
But since you were so willing to join us and you have agreed to 535 1 minutes, which are a few fun questions to get to know a little bit more about you. You, of course, represent Tennessee. So what is your favorite food in your district? Are you going to go barbecue, or is there something
Oh, no.
something
It's just
different?
regular country cooking. If you could fried potatoes and onions, cornbread, you could have soup beans, or I like baked beans, but listen, anything that you can make in the kitchen and whip up the way I grew up, tomato out of a garden, oh my gosh, a good watermelon or a cantaloupe, man, that brings back memories. We would have white bread with apple butter that my grandmother made. White bread's not good for you, and I don't condone it, but man, it was good.
Yeah.
Okay? Tomato sandwiches were good.
So summer is your favorite fruit and vegetable season?
Yeah, peaches, apples, well known for growing apples in my district. And, you know, that's how people used to raise their families, is having an apple orchard. I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah. What is the most difficult part about being in Congress?
It's being away from your family. You know, when I come home, my husband says, "Did you park in the visitor spot?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's not acceptable." And you know, I have young grandsons that are 9 and 11, and you miss a lot of things. And I make it a point to make sure I can get back on the day that we have last votes. I drive back and forth every weekend, and I make sure I get there to their ball games or their school events. And I still have time to do what I've got to do in the district, but you miss being with your family.
Yeah. Are you guys going to leave town today, or is it going to be tomorrow? Have you heard?
Well, we've got votes, so it'll be tomorrow, I hope.
Okay, so they're gonna.
Well, we don't know.
They're not going to move them to today.
You know, I haven't even looked at the rest of my schedule today.
Okay.
I was here till 10 o'clock last night.
I know, it was
on
a
the
late
floor.
night last night.
I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Can't you do that during a decent hour? Maybe they just want to get everybody tired to where they'll hit yes.
Yeah, that's actually probably true. Yes.
There's a method to the madness, I'm sure.
There is. What is your favorite committee assignment?
Well, I sit on Energy and Commerce, and I'm the Vice Chair of Healthcare, and I love everything about that committee. If you ask me, that is the #1 committee in Congress. I don't care if it's on the House side or the Senate side, because we have jurisdiction over the world, and that's the truth. I mean, I love working on the NIL. I mean, that's, you know, I love college sports. That's a big deal. You know, we'll legislate privacy for the country, basically, and we've got to do that. We have jurisdiction over social media. To me, that is one of the detriments to our youth and our young children. You know, we voted unanimously to have TikTok divest, not to ban it, but to divest, because we knew it was a national security threat. These are issues that affect everybody, but people don't know what we're doing behind the scenes. And, you know, commerce, energy, I sit on the energy subcommittee. That there's a growing need for energy in this country.
Yeah.
Data centers that they're wanting to go places. I'm in Tennessee. That's the home of the Manhattan Project, Oak Ridge, TVA. A lot of energy needs there.
What is Tennessee doing about data centers?
Well, you know, some states have put moratoriums. Tennessee's like, let's go nuclear. Let's do the SMRs. And that's what they have, Oak Ridge National Lab. I mean, we're innovative in so many ways in Tennessee.
Aren't small reactors still a ways off?
Well, not really. I mean, permitting reform is the next big hurdle for our committee, and we know the safety profiles of these. It's been around for years, and these are small nuclear reactors or modular reactors to where you can position them anywhere. If a data center wants to pop up, let it have its own. We just talked about this yesterday about ratepayers. They should not have to pay for a data center's usage. Let them pay for it. Maybe that's an SMR. Maybe that's a way to do it. Our grid system needs to be fortified.
Yeah.
I worry about a lot of things, and that's why I get up at 3 o'clock every morning. I told people, I said, this job will cause you to have to color your hair every 3 weeks, because I'm worried about something all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Every day I wake up, there's something new to worry about.
Yeah, but energy and commerce, it really does expand so many different issues. Okay, last question for you. If you had to pick a favorite member on the other side of the aisle, who would it be?
Well, you know, I get along with everybody. I don't call them names. I don't throw bombs. I just came back from a congressional delegation trip with our chairman on commerce, Gus Belracas, and I'll tell you, Terry Sewell went from Alabama. That woman is funny as all get out. She is hilarious, and we had the same birthday.
Oh, when is it?
Who knew? January 1st. We're New Year's babies. I'm like, she goes, I throw a big shindig and we're going to go to Las Vegas. I said, well, call me. I'll be there.
That's
fun
amazing.
stuff. You can get along with anybody. You just got to, and I talk a lot about natural hormone therapy to the women, and they're all. I was the only Republican at a whole Democratic when Halle Berry was our spokesperson.
Yeah.
Listen, they all wanted to talk to me.
Yeah.
If I could get everybody on progesterone up here, we'd have a happy, happy, happy place. And I'm not lying.
Have you started a progesterone caucus?
Well, no, but somebody wanted me to do an endometrius caucus. I'm like, what else do you want me to chair? I'm like, I need to do a natural hormone caucus. Or
That's a great idea.
Longevity. I'm all about, I've done functional medicine, anti-aging as a pharmacist too my whole life. So.
Oh, well, okay, next time you come back on 535, that's what we'll talk about.
We'll talk about all that.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
And we will be right back after a short break.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Brody Mullins here with Amy Andrzak from the Interstate Natural Gas Association. Let's start off by talking about INGA. When did the association start? Who do you represent? And what do you do?
Absolutely. So INGA is the federally focused trade association representing interstate natural gas transmission and storage companies. So the large long-haul pipelines that move gas from areas of production to areas of end use around the country. And we have 28 members, and our job is really to shape the laws and regulations that impact interstate natural gas pipelines.
And the big issue right now is permitting reform that
we've all been talking about. That is our biggest issue in Congress.
So give us the lay of the land here. Permitting reform is something that's been pushed for years, and we're trying to get it done this year. Tell us about it.
Sure. You know, the reason there's so much attention on permitting reform is because it is impossible to build any large-scale infrastructure projects in this country right now. And from the interstate natural gas perspective, you know, we are seeing opposition and legal challenges at every stage of the permitting process. And we're also seeing some states are starting to use state permits like Clean Air and Clean Water Act permits to actually impede or stop projects. So that's why I think you're seeing such a push. Congress needs to pass legislation so that we can get the infrastructure built in this country that's necessary.
And what would meaningful reform look like to you from your perspective?
Absolutely. So from the natural gas pipeline perspective, we're looking for three main things in a permitting reform bill. We're looking for statutory changes to NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. We're looking for statutory changes to the Clean Water Act, and then also some judicial reforms. And I can leave it there. I can go a little deeper on those if you'd like.
Go a little deeper. We've got time.
Sure. So when you think about NEPA, these are the environmental reviews that agencies do before they approve a project. And there was actually a really important Supreme Court decision last year called 7 Counties. And what that did is it helped clarify the environmental analysis that agencies need to do. And so that's really focused on just the project itself. We'd like to see that codified in statute, essentially, the Supreme Court decision. Now, Clean Water Act's a little bit more complicated, and there's a number of different ways to address some of these Clean Water Act related issues we're seeing. You can make some statutory changes where you clarify for states and tribes what it is that they should be analyzing as part of that water quality certification. That's one path. A different path that some have proposed in Congress is actually to change the process so that you would have FERC have jurisdiction over Clean Water Act. Either way, we need to do something so that states can impede projects.
So we've had this system in our country, for over 100 years. What is causing the change now, or the need? Is it an increased demand for energy overall?
Absolutely. We are seeing a real increase in overall demand for energy. Our foundation did a study earlier this year, the North American Midstream Infrastructure Report, which showed increased demand for electricity generation. Now that's driven primarily from just more electrification of all end uses, but also data centers. And our report also showed a real increase in demand for more LNG exports as well.
And you also have a number, 1.4 trillion. That's how much new demand. Is that just your industry, or is that energy overall?
So our report, which looked ahead 25 years at what would be energy needs and the infrastructure needed to meet them, found that we need almost 1.4 trillion in midstream infrastructure. So that's looking at pipelines, gathering systems, processing, compressor stations, LNG export facilities, so that midstream part of the energy value chain. The report also looked at emerging technologies like CO2 and hydrogen pipelines. So that's what needs to be built in the next 25 years.
Wow. And let's talk about data centers. We hear a lot about data centers and AI. I imagine they are a part of the new demands for energy that you're dealing with.
Absolutely. Data centers are part of that overall electrification demand. It's not all of it, but it's a huge driver for sure.
So let's talk about the bill itself, or bills itself. Where do things stand in the House? Where do things stand in the Senate? And how can you get things moving forward?
Absolutely. So the House has actually passed a number of different permitting reform related bills. Two that Inga supported were the Permit Act and the Speed Act. And what's happening in the Senate right now is the main committees of jurisdiction, EPW and Senate Energy, are working hard to put together the various pieces of what would be a comprehensive permitting reform bill. We think they'll probably bring in pieces from the House bills, but they're creating their own legislation. And from our perspective, we hope and expect it'll deal with the issues I raised, but we also know that Senate Democrats want to see a transmission component in the bill. That would come out of the Senate Energy Committee. So you have two key committees that have different aspects of what would be a comprehensive bill that they need to put together and then have passed the Senate.
And so the problem, as you know, on Capitol Hill is always time.
Absolutely.
So it feels like we just got back from the July 4th recess because we did, but all of a sudden we're a week and a half away from August, and then September is only a little bit of time, and then gone in October. How do you find the time?
Well, you've actually identified what's my main concern. So I think that there is a lot of momentum behind permitting reform. I think both Democrats and Republicans want comprehensive permitting reform. What I'm getting nervous about now is the clock. It's exactly what you articulated. And as you know, they're going to have to pass a spending bill in the fall. That always disrupts Congress. But my big concern is hearing that folks want to kick the can down to lame duck. My advice is let's try to get that done now before the election. It's just too important.
And why are people saying lame duck? What's the analysis?
Because as you already articulated, Congress runs out of time, and when they think there are things that may be challenging to get done, they say, oh, we'll try to do it in the lame duck.
Yeah.
I think that's a dangerous strategy for something this important.
And tell us about some of the key Democrats, and particularly Senator Whitehouse, who he seems to be a key player here. He said some things recently that seem to be maybe positive. Do you think that he could be in the middle of a deal?
So my understanding is that Senator Whitehouse and Senator Capito have been working very well together as leading the EPW committee, which will have a lot of the jurisdictional pieces of this. And that's really important. So I absolutely think Senator Whitehouse is part of any big deal, in the same way that Senator Lee and Senator Heinrich will need to be for the Senate Energy jurisdiction.
And let's say, I mean, any bill in Congress obviously needs to be bipartisan. It's obviously more favorable if you have Republicans pushing this. But let's say Democrats take the House and maybe the Senate. Is this dead, or how would you try to revitalize things?
Well, I certainly hope it would not be dead. That would be my hope, because as I said, there's such need for this, and there seems to be a lot of momentum behind it. But I do think if Democrats take over either chamber, you do take a couple steps backwards just in terms of restarting the negotiations. Folks may be starting from different positions. And so that would be concerning to me.
And there are also Democrats and who are sort of focusing on renewable and wind plants. Donald Trump has talked about how he doesn't like wind plants, does not want that part of the deal. How do you persuade people that we sort of need everything at once into this bill?
Well, I think that goes back to this discussion on demand and why does this demand exist? And it is increased electrification, which is something that in many respects are the result of a lot of Democratic policies, right? You have battery-powered cars, and those things increase overall electrification. But you also, I think, need to have an appreciation for the national security implications here. I think there's a lot of confusion about why we need data centers. It's not so our cat memes are better than China's cat memes. There's a real national security imperative for our country to win this AI race. And so I hope that's something that policymakers understand and appreciate, and then in turn appreciate the scale of the infrastructure that needs to be built to enable this.
Amy Andrzak, thanks so much for joining us from the Interstate Natural Gas Association of America, INGA. Thanks for joining us. Come back anytime.
Thank you, Brody. I appreciate it.
We'll be right back on 535.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
Congresswoman, we only have a couple minutes,
Okay.
which is perfect for our 535 1 minute.
Should I be afraid?
Who's the smartest member of Congress?
So I'm really putting you on the spot here.
Don't tell anybody this.
But I'm too much of a politician to answer that question.
This is crazy.
What's the best committee? I do like them all.
On you, baby.
That was good. That was good.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
All right, can you give me a 3, 2, 1? Welcome back to 530. Welcome back to 535. I'm Brody Mullins here with Matt Seaholm, President CEO of the Plastics Industry Association. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brody.
So tell us about your association.
Yeah, so the Plastics Industry Association, we represent companies from across the entire supply chain of the plastics industry. So we've got equipment manufacturers, we've got the material suppliers, we've got the converters, and we've got recyclers. So this is the entire value chain of the plastics industry. More than 1.7 million people working in the plastics industry, more than $550 billion of economic value. It's 8th largest manufacturing sector in the United States. So proud to represent both the materials and the products that get produced in America.
And so across the board, tell us what your major industry priorities are here on Capitol Hill.
Sure. Like everybody, we want to talk about manufacturing. We are an industry that is focused on manufacturing, but we're kind of uniquely American in that regard. We actually produce the raw materials. We create an end product with that raw material, and then we recycle it. And that's kind of one of our claims to fame. Because of that, we're sort of in a unique position. Secondly, as everybody is, we're looking for certainty. When it comes to trade and tariffs, our members are making things that are manufacturing inputs. And when we're talking to folks on Capitol Hill and in the administration, we want to make sure that certainty is there. I was in Louisiana just a couple of weeks ago, and this is a company who had machines on the water when announcements were made when it came to some of the tariffs. That type of uncertainty really is tough. And then the third one, which is really why we're up on Capitol Hill today, is increasing circularity, keeping plastic in the economy and out of the environment.
So that brings us to today. So I want to circle back on some of these issues in a bit, but the House Energy and Commerce Committee had a big hearing this morning. You were there. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so two bills that we care about, the RMAA, which is all about advanced recycling, setting standards, definitions, and just leveling the playing field for that new and exciting innovation. And then the other one is the PACT Act. The PACT Act is all about, again, setting standards and definitions when it comes to labeling. marketing claims for recycling and other types of circularity forms. And what's so important about these is talking about that certainty, talking about private investment. You really do need to send these signals, and doing it at a national level, it's important.
So let's dive into these bills a little bit. So you said the first one was the Recycled Materials Attribution Act, and that prevents people from doing what? Making misleading comments?
Well, so what it's really about is it's about setting the standard for advanced recycling or chemical recycling. So when you're setting these definitions, what we've seen is, and it's the same reason for the need of the PAC Act, states are setting their own definitions. And when states do that, you've got a patchwork of laws that are trying to ultimately be adhered to, but it's very difficult to do so. So RMAA is about advanced recycling, setting those definitions, putting in place so the billions of dollars of investment that are going into that technology continue to do so.
And then we've got HR 6832, which is the PAC Act. That's
Yeah.
Randy Weber. We had Randy Weber on the show 2 weeks ago. Quite a character. How's he been helping you on this, on the PAC Act?
Well, Randy Weber's done a great job in shepherding this through. He had a great op-ed on your website, 535news.com. There's the free plug. He's been talking about the importance of labeling claims being consistent across the board. Just last week, a labeling bill in California was overturned, or it was held by a federal judge because it was unworkable. And the reason for that was California set a standard that was in direct conflict with 29 other states. It was pretty much impossible for a company who is producing a product and sending it to all 50 states or even the West Coast to adhere to some of those requirements while also, adhering to what California was doing.
So what strikes me is that Randy Weber is one of the most conservative Republicans in the House, and here he is working on sort of a recycling bill. I mean, it kind of shows some of the bipartisan support that you have.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. Both bills are bipartisan because these are important steps to increase circularity, right? If we want to increase recycling rates, and if we're all committed to that as a sustainability story, these are the types of bills that just need to be in place, because so many of the other forces working against it really can create that stifling of innovation that we strive to get.
So when I think of recycling, when I'm at my house, I think I'm, combating climate change and not wasting things. But recycling is also an economic driver.
Oh, without a doubt.
Tell us about that.
Well, a lot of different ways to think about it. But if one report, I'll just use these figures because I think it's probably the most impactful. If 50% of the plastic that went into landfills was recycled instead, we would create 170,000 jobs. Wow. That gives you a sense of the waste. Every time one of our products or materials end up in the landfill and not in staying in the economy, we're losing value. So these bills, everything else that we push is about capturing that value in that used plastic material so we can keep it in the economy. We can continue to, build economic value that way.
We've got the midterms coming up. It's mid-July. We've only got a few weeks until August, and then we're done, then we're back, and then we're gone again. Is there any time left to get these bills done?
Yeah, so the good news is the bipartisanship showed this morning in the hearing. There was no doubt a recognition that these are reasonable approaches. They're important. They could be very impactful and necessary. So put that together, yeah, I'm still hopeful that between now and the end of the year, these kind of end up hitching their wagon to something else that's moving and end up on the president's desk.
I've got a whole bunch of questions left.
Sure.
We only have about a minute. I'd love to hear more about your personal story. From Wisconsin, came to Capitol Hill. Our audience is the 535, the members of Congress and staff. Tell us about your journey to
well, fair enough. My first trip to Washington, D.C. and to Capitol Hill was then a district attorney, Sean Duffy's campaign manager, and then Congressman-elect Sean Duffy's chief of staff. Chief. Yeah, so I started here that way, and he's had one heck of a run, incredible career, doing great things at DOT. I've done a bunch of other things that ended me as CEO of the Plastics Industry Association.
What advice would you give to young congressional aides to how to navigate Capitol Hill, make relationships to ultimately move on to a job like the one you have now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit old school. My feeling is put your head down, work hard, and you'll be rewarded for it. So anybody who's coming to Capitol Hill, nothing is beneath you. Go ahead and put the work in, and it's ultimately going to pay off.
I agree with that. Matt Seaholm, President and CEO of the Plastics Industry Association, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brody. Appreciate it.
I'm Brody Mullins. We'll be right back on 535.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to The Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Back on 535, I'm Scott McFarland in the Cannon Rotunda, Congressman Suhas Subramanyam. Number 95, our 95th interview here on 535. But again, as we've mentioned before, you're always first in our hearts.
That's right. Thank you.
Let's be clear about that. You're representing a Northern Virginia congressional district, which means you are representing really a birthplace of sorts of data centers, of massive data centers in America. A lot of that started in Loudoun County, Virginia, which you represent the entirety of. What do your constituents think about this? Maybe they have a different perspective because they were there from the ground floor.
Well, at first it was okay. I mean, the first data centers were in our county. AOL was there, and so you had a lot of fiber in the ground. Yeah, headquartered there. And so, you know, people were okay with that. But now we're going to be going on hundreds of data centers. If my district were a country, it would be the fourth country in terms of number of data centers. And up to 70% of the internet can go through Loudoun County alone in a day. So you look at that impact, but then you look at what's happening to the residents as a result of it. So you're talking about higher utility prices because the residents are saddled with paying for the energy infrastructure. Talking about them putting utility lines through people's communities and schools. And so it's become a huge issue, and there's been a backlash now to it.
Is there a part of your constituency that says, hey, these things have for years underwritten our school budgets. They've helped bring some money in, some jobs. Maybe not as many jobs as perhaps larger scale manufacturing would bring in, but they've been some source of economic engine.
Yeah, well, certainly the local government likes it because you can take the revenue and you look really good, you know, sort of opening up these new parks and new roads. But I think constituents are starting to realize that, maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe we'd rather pay higher property taxes than have a utility pole in my backyard, literally in some cases. And so I've been saying we need to slow down when it comes to this data center development in our area. There's lots of other parts of the country that are better positioned at this point to have them, and they want them. And in our community, we don't really want them anymore at this point.
Explain the legislation you've supported on this that you've been trying to galvanize your colleagues behind.
Yeah, it's simple. So data centers are now a target in wars, and so our community is a target when you're building most of the data centers in the country in our community. So we need to find a way to protect them, number one, and keep our community safe. Two, we need to make sure that utility companies pay for that they have the data centers pay for the power that they want generated. And so not the residents and not the folks like you and me who pay our utility bills every month. We shouldn't be subsidizing the data center's power infrastructure.
How do you craft legislation to get the utilities to pay? How do you alter that or orchestrate that?
So our state corporation commission, so the states have their own regulators who come up with these policies, and it'd be better if the state actually passed legislation. What we're trying to do is say, you're going to lose your highway funding, you're going to lose other types of federal funding if you don't get together with your state legislature and come up with a way to not saddle people with the energy infrastructure costs of data centers. And finally, we need to make sure we do siting better. And so we cannot put them all in one place. We need to put them in places where there's community buy-in. We need to put them in places that already have the energy infrastructure and the water infrastructure to be able to handle them.
I'm thinking of like the water utilities so many communities have, where you have an increasing security perimeter, trying to keep them from being vulnerable. Seeing the same thing with electric utilities. Are you talking about getting some type of, for lack of a better phrase, fencing or fortress-like security for the data centers?
Yeah, I mean, infrastructure that supports data centers is also a target too, first of all. And that's infrastructure that supports the community around the data centers. So we have to keep them safe. So that's why I started with safety. It's because no one's really talking about this. People are talking about the utility costs and the water impact, and I think those are critically important. But we also need to talk about the safety of communities around data centers. They're being bombed right now in the Middle East. They're being bombed in Russia, Ukraine. They're targets at this point.
Your constituents are probably thinking, welcome to the party, everyone. We've been talking about this for years now. Even though it's become a national point of contention, it's been a point of contention locally for a while. Mm-hmm. Can you explain why those things grew so distinctively in your district initially?
Yeah, when I started running for the state legislature, I was one of the voices saying that there's too many data centers at this point and that we need to cut back. But there wasn't really a public uproar. The community didn't really recognize what was happening. And then we started seeing more data centers getting built on land where people thought, maybe that could be a park or something that benefits the community. Then you started seeing utility costs go up, and then you started seeing these power lines being built. So they still want to build many more across homes, across schools. And so now people are seeing that impact on their lives, and it's more visceral to them than it was 5 or 6 years ago when they were doing some of these approvals.
And if I'm not mistaken, your district has a distinctive agro-tourism industry. Is it impacting that? Those types of things require aesthetics and require a pristine environment.
Right, yeah, and what they're doing is in the eastern part of my district, they're building the data centers, but then they want to connect it to coal country in West Virginia, and so they have to stretch power lines across those beautiful, scenic western parts of my county and my district, and so that impacts those industries as well.
Let's talk a bit about the federal workforce. You have a disproportionate number of federal workers in your district, one of the largest concentrations in America. What are they saying about the return to work policies the Trump administration has instituted, where people are going back into offices? The Trump administration would argue perhaps it's more productive work when they're there. What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, remember, people enter the federal government not because it's more money, it's usually less money, but because of the benefits and because they're able to serve their country. And so when the private sector is offering work from home, they're offering to have flexible hours, it's hard to compete with that. What you're going to end up getting is not the best and brightest in our federal workforce. You're going to get the folks who want a different scene and want to go into the federal government, but you're not going to get the same kind of talent. And so we're losing a lot of talent. We're having a brain drain in the federal workforce because of this. And it affects my constituents who, drive an hour sometimes to work every day. And so the traffic has gotten worse for everybody because there's not telework as an option for as many people anymore.
Are you seeing the DOGE impacts only 17 months in? And if so, what DOGE impacts are you seeing on the landscape in the Virginia 10th?
Yeah, well, in the Virginia 10th and in my community, we've seen DOGE impacts in terms of restaurants feeling it from not as many federal workers coming in. Federal workers themselves and their spouses being impacted by this. Some of them feel like they have to move now to other parts of the country to get another job because the federal government is no longer that job security they were looking for. It's also no longer as good a job because they had a mission and their mission has been changed to fulfill the wishes of the president. So there's a lot of issues with not being able to try to attract great talent. We have people on Capitol Hill today talking about wanting to attract great science and tech talent to government. How are you going to do that if you're treating the federal workforce this way? And it has an impact on our economy. Even during the shutdowns, we had food shortages. We had people who were going to food shelters who'd never been before. And so it's really devastating. But this impacts the entire country too, because that means worse services for the entire country. And that means that brain drain is going to hurt our ability to serve the American people.
We'll talk in the minutes we have left about transportation and infrastructure. You have one of these districts that is clogged. I think to put charitably, you're in a suburb of a major city, you have some clogged roads. What can you tell your colleagues to try to get them to move on infrastructure projects, on mass transit, in a Congress controlled by Republicans?
Yeah, I'll say that some of this actually needs to start at the local level. So, for instance, we have the Silver Line going out to Ashburn and Loudoun County, but we're building a lot of data centers around these train stations. I think we should be building homes. We should be building apartment complexes and workforce housing. And so building the housing is important, and making sure that where you build it is next to mass transit so that people can better access that mass transit. Because otherwise, if you have to drive an hour just to the train station, you might as well just drive an hour and a half to work instead. And then we have to be more willing to do telework and flexible work policies. People can do the work at home. We saw that during COVID. So let's try to work with our employers on making sure that that option is available.
Just a minute left. We have to ask you about your district. Paint a picture for people about the Virginia 10th. Where is the place to go? What is the local place to see?
Yeah, it depends on the time of year, but if you want to see, the fall is coming up. We have some of the best fall festivals in the country, and so you can go to Cox Farms, for instance, near my house, and check out the fall festival there. If you have kids, it's great to go out to great country farms out in western Loudoun. And so there's a lot of great things to do. And then, if you want to come to we've got Dulles Town Center Mall. We've got everything in our district, and so people should come out. If they're in DC, make the commute out, and we'll treat you right.
Isn't it the wedding central of the Mid-Atlantic too?
People love having their weddings. Yeah, it's very scenic. There's beautiful scenery, and there's lots of options.
Suhas Subramanyam represents the Virginia 10th District, and he is here in a district that stays the same now in Virginia. There was talk about redistricting, but it remains what it is in the next Congress. Thank you, Mr. Subramanyam.
Thank you.
Coming up, my conversation with Montana Republican Troy Downing. It's in a moment. You're watching 535.
You're watching 535. We'll be right back.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
As promised, joined now by first-term Republican from Montana, Troy Downing, who has the First district.
Second
district.
Close.
It was a coin flip.
Yeah, could have been one or the other.
It was going to be one or the other. First district of Montana. How you liking your first term?
I love it. I love what we're doing. I've found a lot of smart people that care about good policy, and we put together coalitions trying to get things done. I mean, there's moments of frustration. I've always been the guy with my name on the building. I ran an agency. I was a statewide elected before. I was the Commissioner of Securities and Insurance. Yeah, state auditor, also a land commissioner. But, I've always believed in coalitions and teams. But end of the day, when I was the commissioner, my decision was the decision. And now you've got to get so many people together to get things passed. And, we do that, but sometimes it's frustrating. But to answer your question succinctly, I love what we do. I think we're passing good policy, and it's meaningful and impactful to the people who sent me here.
The reason I ask that is, of the 535, it's a good chunk of you that were executives before you became legislators.
Right.
It's a whole different muscle, isn't it?
Right, it is. And I talk about that because I was in the private sector in financial services. I had an investment banking group, we had a broker-dealer, did a lot of commercial real estate, built an insurance company around that. So I was in the private sector, and then I ran as the regulator. It gave me the opportunity to address a lot of the things that I saw in the private sector that I thought needed addressing. And now I'm the lawmaker, so hold my beer.
Yeah, all of us need to hold our beers every now and again. I want to talk about financial services since you brought it up. You're on the Financial Services Committee, been serving there since the start of your term. One of the bills that caught our attention was this Main Street Capital Area Access Act. Explain what it does, because you're getting into the world of bank reform, which can sometimes be tough to explain to your constituents, I suspect.
Right. Well, and just a little bit of background. One of the biggest contributors to success as an individual, as somebody starting out a family, as somebody starting a small business, is access to capital. And the more we can do to solve that problem, I mean, there's equity, there's debt, there's all these different things, or just keeping your own capital in tax reform. That is one of the biggest drivers to financial success. And so what we run into, especially in places like Montana, very rural state, my district is one of the most rural. I'm the largest in the lower 48. We have really, really long roads. So a very rural district. And the community banks in Montana are the lifeblood in terms of getting, operating loans out for farmers and ranchers, mortgages for homes, everything that you need to borrow money for. And the problem is that these small banks, these community banks, are being treated like large institutions, and it just doesn't make sense. It hobbles them in terms of their requirements for holding capital, where their ratio is on their balance, all these things that slow down the flow of capital, the access to capital. And what we're just trying to do here on a very high level is make it so that they can operate without having the constraints of a very large national financial institution.
What are some of the restraints and some of the regulations? They have to have so much capital on hand physically? Or
that's a big, the amount that they can actually lend. The capital standards for them is very, so you've got a bunch of money that's not going out into mortgages, so allowing that. There's just the regulatory environment on when and how they're doing examinations on limitations on de novo, on new lenders trying to come into the market, and what the capital standards are there. And one of the reliefs that we have in there is allowing them to spend a couple of years building up to that capital requirement rather than expecting it on day one. And having an on-ramp for that, I think, is a big part of that.
One of the things that gets people concerned is hearing about deregulation of any form of banks, because we are still freshly remembering 17 years ago.
Right.
Almost 18 years ago now, where we saw a destabilized banking system that was not being policed well enough, almost cannibalize our entire economy. Is some of this eased because they're so small, or is this something that you think that has got safeguards sufficient to prevent catastrophe from happening?
Well, I'll tell you that the regulators that I see, especially on the state chartered banks, are very good at doing what they do. The examinations, making sure that they're doing everything that they should. I think in terms of small banks, it does need to be right-sized. And one thing that you alluded to but didn't say is obviously having a small community bank with relatively small assets coming down as opposed to like a Silicon Valley bank has much different, much different impact.
It's not Bank of America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. It's not Bank of America. Yeah, so I think that, first of all, I don't want anybody to think that we're deregulating. We're just right-sizing it so that a small bank that doesn't have the issues that a very large one can actually get capital out there to serve the communities that they know, the people that they know, the industry they know, or the assets that they know in the communities that they know. I think that's important to just kind of get out of the way on all that without putting aside any of the requirements for their capital standards, for their reserves, for their examinations, and just making sure you're right-sizing it.
Let's talk about the housing bill. You had authored a section about repairs, and I wanted to get a deeper sense as to what that component was and where it fits in the newly enrolled law.
Right. And I just got to say kudos to Chairman Hill and to Chairman Flood for getting that through. I mean, that was yeoman's work, and it wasn't easy. A lot of the back and forth. Bicamerally was, I'm just so happy that did become law, because as I travel around my district, as I mentioned, very, very rural, there's a lot of limiting factors in being able to recruit and hire doctors, nurses, teachers in these smaller communities. And the number one issue that I hear from all these communities is they can't house them. And so this is a big problem in my district, in my state, in the country, making sure that
just
we have
available housing stock.
Available housing, yeah. We just need to make sure that we're solving that problem. And some of this bill was relieving regulatory hurdles, and I think that was all well placed. Some of it was, again, access to capital. But the bill that you're talking about, what that was, and I just want to first of all make it clear, no new money came. This wasn't an appropriation. This wasn't this was just taking a program that had capital set aside to help the very bottom, the folks that were in a state of disrepair, that they couldn't meet the minimum standards for HUD projects or HUD programs. So it just helped them with this money that wasn't being allocated. It redirected that so that they could get to the point where they met those minimum standards. And so here's something that's important to keep in mind. As you start to solve a problem anywhere in the strata, from the expensive house to that one that's fallen apart, anywhere you start to solve that in the middle, there's always movement. It creates more supply, which puts relief on the system that helps up and down, wherever that is. So, we want to make sure that we are talking about all of that in terms of relieving the regulatory hurdles, making sure it's quick to get product to market, and it's as inexpensive as we can, and that we have, in like you were talking about the Whole Home Repairs Act, we have some tools of helping that very bottom of the strata get into a point where they can have, have access to normal services like anybody else.
Got a minute left. Walk me through again the component of this provision. If you make repairs, you get a certain benefit from it?
Right. Well, basically it's, and you'll see this even in lending, where a house doesn't meet the minimum criteria for a lender to say okay. And so this helps just get you out of that place where it is in disrepair to a point where it is functional. And so that's the simplest way to think about it.
And again, it would add to the housing stock either way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, just a moment left here. I have to ask you where in your district in Montana is the best place to get food?
Here, I'm going to tell you an interesting one. So there's the Windsor Bar in Boulder, Montana, which is just west of Helena. And if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't know, because it looks like it's chained up in the front. You have to go through the back door.
I like a speakeasy. That's nice. Yeah.
It's kind of a dive bar. The menu is printed on the back of a napkin holder, and they have T-bone steaks, ribeyes, and I think they might have a burger on there. And when you order it, doesn't come with anything green. It's a steak.
Yes.
It's they have a baked potato with sour cream and some Texas toast. And when they come out, the bartender comes out with white butcher paper wrapped steaks that are about that thick, unwraps them, puts a bunch of Montreal steak seasoning, throws it on the grill in the middle of the bar, and fills the place with smoke. You walk out there smelling like, steak and Montreal steak seasoning, but that's my favorite.
I've asked that question of a lot of the 535. That is the best answer.
There you
I want
go.
you to know the Windsor Bar is very proud of your endorsement. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I'm Scott McFarland. This is 535. Back in a moment.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Mariana Sotomayor, congressional correspondent with Puck News. I am now joined by Congressman Chris Pappas, Democrat from New Hampshire, and also the 96th member on the show. We're getting really close to 100 before August recess. We'll talk about a number of things, but first and foremost, thanks for coming. Thanks for making your debut.
Proud to be number 96.
Yeah, so close to 100. Thanks for almost making it happen. Let's talk about surface transportation. A number of lawmakers obviously have put their stamp on this bill and want to see and hope that it can get through not just the House but the Senate, this Congress. You introduced legislation to reauthorize the Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program.
Yes.
Tell us about it. What does it do?
Yeah, ATIP for short. We
ATIP.
got to have acronyms for
Yes.
everything here. But this came out of conversations I've been having with folks in New Hampshire for a long time about the need to identify specific sources of funding for trail infrastructure, for bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Oftentimes, communities work to fit a square peg into a round hole with respect to funding those kinds of projects, which are important for mobility, for quality of life, and they add amenities for communities that are really terrific. We've got the chance to build out these networks on a regional, statewide, national basis that can connect our communities. And so we work to get that into the bipartisan infrastructure law. Got it authorized, funding has gone out, and we're working to try to make sure that program continues. The need continues to grow from what I'm hearing from community members in New Hampshire about the need to invest in trails and connect our communities, and so it's just creating a dedicated funding source in order to do that. At the same time, we're working on reauthorization of surface transportation. We were disappointed in the first version of the House bill that came out of committee that did not preserve funding for ATIP, but we're going to keep pushing this. The funding was made flexible in the bill so that projects that had been eligible for this program can apply for funding through programs like CMAQ that are preserved in the House bill. But we've got a long way to go. This shouldn't be about putting all our eggs in the roads and highways basket. We have to diversify. We need an intermodal system of transportation, and those local connections promote public safety, promote economic development, and a good quality of life. And so we're going to continue to fight for funding for that.
Yeah, this seems like something, even though people may not be thinking about when they're walking on sidewalks back home, that could be beneficial to local communities. Like, I'm originally from Tampa, Florida, and I remember when they unveiled our river walk by the Hillsborough River, and that you just saw a boom of restaurants, coffee shops, or just like recreational areas kind of pop up. Why wasn't this necessarily something that was put into the surface transportation bill? Because again, it seems like there could be a lot of benefits for constituents back home.
Yeah, well, we got bipartisan support the last time around, and there is still bipartisan support for things like the CMAQ program, Safe Streets, that do provide some important opportunities for communities. But we're going to keep making the case, and there's great interest in this around the country. I've been out there on trails in my state. We have a lot of these old rail lines that have been converted into trails that allow people to get to work by bike, or allow a new coffee shop to open up next to a trail where you've got a lot of people recreating and it's good for the local small business economy. So it's just really smart. I think when I talk to younger people in particular, they're less likely to own a car, to want to drive everywhere.
Yes.
They want transportation options, but it's really good for people of all ages. Many of these paths, these recreational opportunities are open to people of all ages and abilities. And so I think it's just smart to think about how we build our communities for the future. And any sort of infrastructure bill has to be well-rounded in terms of where the funding goes.
I'm sure you have been in many conversations and negotiations, and it always comes up, but it's because it's something I hear from lawmakers. Well, what is the measure of success for this piece of legislation or for this proposal? How will we know if it's worth reappropriating or putting money behind an effort like this? So, when you're talking to lawmakers about ATIP, what is that measure of success, and what should be something that, what's the convincing argument for those who say, well, I don't know if we need to put money towards this when we can put it towards a number of other things?
Yeah, well, the proof is in the pudding with investments that have gone toward bike safety and trail infrastructure. You see projects getting done that are having a direct impact on our communities. And I see it in New Hampshire, where there are local folks that have these groups that are raising money, doing bake sales, but they're doing 1 mile at a time. And oftentimes they just don't have the funding to be able to really, in a short time frame, build out the kind of network that we can realize here. So this is all about getting shovels in the ground, getting projects done. There's great interest in that across the board, whether it's repaving highways, modernizing bridges, making sure that we have strong transit systems. But oftentimes these trails, these paths, these sidewalks are the local connections that make it all work. So I think that's the measure of success is, how does this help our transportation networks all come together and serve the community?
Let's talk about highways. You have a bill that's
Sure.
called the Highway Fair Shake Act. Tell us about it. What would it do?
Yeah, well, the notion is that we should be getting more money out to all states through the highway formula, but that there needs to be some fairness. And small states like mine have been disadvantaged for far too long in the highway formula, which dates back 20 years and is a thorny issue for Congress to reopen. I think this is a good opportunity to do this. If we've got a 5-year surface transportation bill that we're putting together, we've got to make sure that the funding distributes, that the formula distributes funding on a fair and equitable basis. So this would provide for 0.5% of Highway Trust Fund dollars to at least go out to each and every state so that there's a higher baseline of support that states would receive. In New Hampshire, we've got a lot of rural roads, a lot of lane miles even for a small state. And we've got to make sure that the big states aren't crowding out the smaller ones like New Hampshire, Vermont, and some of our other neighbors in the Northeast that need this. And frankly, that have roads that get beat up in the winter. We put a lot of salt down on our roads to make sure they're passable during the winter months. That's another measure that should be taken into consideration with respect to the formula.
Yeah.
So it's time to update it.
You mentioned it's a thorny issue to even kind of open up that conversation. Why is it? Is it because, members defensive of their state, they want to make sure, especially if they are from larger states that have, I'm just thinking of like Los Angeles, just see those pictures in your head of all those highways. Do they just want to keep this form because it is more beneficial for them at
the
this time?
The status quo can be hard to shake up because there are states that are winners under the current formula.
Okay.
And to ask people to open up that conversation sometimes is tough for those people that are doing well and maybe even doing better than they should be based upon the realities out there of transportation. So let's do what's fair. Let's at least provide small states like mine with 0.5% of these federal highway dollars. That would increase funding. But I think with respect to the bill, generally speaking, and how we distribute money through the formula, we need to increase the amount of money that's coming through it because project costs are going up. Those dollars are buying less today than they were 5 years ago when the bipartisan infrastructure law was being negotiated. High fuel prices, high costs for all the materials that go into a project is meaning that states are doing fewer projects with the same amount of money. So we have to take that into consideration and really, open the aperture on the amount of money that's coming through these formulas so that no state is disadvantaged, and then provide for some equity for smaller states.
I'm totally curious about this in the formula. Is population part of it in any way? Because we've seen, right, even like the last couple of years, so many people moving from one state to another, just general population growth. Is that part of the calculation? Because I imagine more people means more people want to get from point A to point B, and if you're not widening the highways or streets and all of that, it just makes it more complicated.
It is, and there's also a calculation around how much a state pays in to the Highway Trust Fund, that they need to receive at least 95% of that money back to their state for projects. But look, at the end of the day, we got to think big about the future in this country. We have to build for the future. There are a lot of projects that have been delayed for far too long. Those costs go up. The deferred maintenance creates challenges with respect to infrastructure projects. So this is about putting some shovels in the ground, supporting construction jobs, and ensuring that our states have strong economies. So I hope that we can get a good conversation going on how to make highway funding as robust as possible and make sure those dollars are equitably dispersed.
We'll see what happens there. I wanted to ask you, separate from infrastructure transportation, but something that's known as forever chemicals, PFAS. I remember hearing about it up here on Capitol Hill maybe about a decade ago. But since then, there's been so much more conversation around it, awareness for the public about where PFAS could be. It's really on a number of surfaces in everyday life. You can't really get rid of it, right? Yeah. How are you combating that issue? Why did it come to the forefront for your own awareness, and you found it important to try and regulate this?
Well, my district, I learned about this probably about 10 years ago or so from community members that had been impacted around a former military base, an Air Force base, where they used firefighting foam that was laden with high concentrations of PFAS. It got into the groundwater, into the environment, has poisoned well water, and has made it undrinkable and unsafe for human health. Long-time exposure to PFAS, which bioaccumulates in the human body, and these chemicals, it takes hundreds of years for them to break down. They're called forever chemicals because they persist in the human body and in the environment. But in certain concentrations, it's linked to chronic conditions like cancer. We've seen high cancer rates in New Hampshire around sites that have had PFAS contamination. Also, old industrial sites is a place where you'll see it. So there is a strong bipartisan interest in Congress to addressing this. Also in the bipartisan infrastructure law was dedicated funding for states to clean up PFAS, to make sure that we're filtering it out at publicly owned treatment works. But there's a lot more that we have to do to make sure that we're not just perpetuating these chemicals that are not going to break down in the environment and that are harmful to human health.
Has Congress been able to, have that oversight ability to know whether states are complying to that piece in the infrastructure bill? Like, are they cleaning up? What are they doing to make sure that PFAS is not as prevalent?
Well, the grants have been deployed, and so states are in receipt of dollars that they're putting to good use for water and wastewater projects, and we've seen that in New Hampshire as well. But we really need EPA to step up to the plate here. They've known for 50 years plus that these chemicals are harmful. And there have been, efforts to address this, to regulate it, to set maximum contaminant levels for drinking water. A lot of that work is being undone right now by the Trump administration. We're working on a simple bill just to say that under the Clean Water Act, we should be regulating these chemicals and ensuring that we're going to the source, the known industries that are polluting our environment, our surface water with PFAS chemicals, ultimately holding them responsible and not local taxpayers that are paying the bill for their water or for their wastewater. So I think it's smart for us to figure out how we can set national standards, state by state. This is going to be a big challenge for states to address this, and we need to provide grants in terms of upgrading the infrastructure so that water is safe.
Yeah, a lot to do on that front.
Yes.
We only have a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
Since this is your first time on 535, I wanted to ask you to be part of our 535 1 minutes.
Absolutely.
And answer as quickly as you want.
Okay.
But it's not a magic minute, so no 7-minute responses, 15 minutes. What are you doing for August recess, since it's right around the corner?
Well, I'm going to be spending it in New Hampshire on the ground, which is the best place to be, frankly, in the
best
summer.
Time of year right now?
We don't get the humidity like we get here in D.C., but I'll be out there in the community just connecting with folks. And it's a time, where people want to be heard. They want to be part of the conversation. They think everything going on in Washington is crazy, is not necessarily focused on their lives. And so it's about understanding where people are and building that connection to be able to change the way things work here.
You've been up here on Capitol Hill for some time. What is the one thing that you wish you could get done? What's still that number one priority? even though you've seen a number of things, get done under Democratic leadership in particular, but what's still that one issue that you're like, I want to try and get it through?
Well, I think the things we just talked
Okay.
about. I mean, ultimately, passing a new surface transportation bill is a top priority of mine. We got to build on the momentum of the bipartisan infrastructure law and make sure we're taking additional steps forward to invest in our communities. So there are a number of things that come to mind, from addiction and mental health, where we have to sustain efforts to create opportunities for people to get the care that they need, to address the ACA premium subsidies that have gone away, which is a disaster for affordable health care in New Hampshire, trying to roll back the Medicaid cuts that were pushed last year that are also going to be a disaster for the delivery of health care, particularly in rural areas. So there's a lot of concern across the board.
Yeah.
I worry about the functionality of the institutions here in Washington. We are not in a position where things are moving in a collaborative way, where we're putting wins on the board for the country. And that's concerning for all the issues I think the country cares about.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see the last couple congressional terms. It's some of the most historically low producing Congresses, both the House and the Senate, not necessarily passing as many bills as before. Speaking of legislating, who is your favorite person to work with across the aisle?
It's a tough question because, on some of the issues we've mentioned, like, on PFAS, Brian Fitzpatrick is a go-to. Mm-hmm. Some of the best work that gets done in Congress is on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Yeah. And you can build really good relationships with people that you might not expect. I work with Derek Van Orden regularly on issues having to deal with housing insecurity for veterans. We passed a bill to stand up a new program that supports veterans who are able to make partial payments on their loans and ensure that they're not foreclosed on. So those kinds of things are possible if you're willing to get to know people and figure out where you have some common interests. And we need more of that here and not less.
So this could be a little bit of a controversial question because many people flock to New Hampshire for politics. I went a couple years ago as a campaign embed in the 2020 election, and so many recommendations of where to go eat. Where's the best food in your district?
Well, I have a family restaurant business.
It's a good one.
So if we set that aside for a moment, I mean, New Hampshire's great. We've got a lot of independent restaurants, small businesses, from the Mount Washington Valley to the Lakes region to the Seacoast to the cities. So, any place out there is sort of on the first in the nation trail. I know sometimes there are certain places that get held up as like this is the place to go for to find politicians, and they're everywhere come New Hampshire primary season, which is really great. So, and that's what's special about it is that the voters get to bring these candidates into their coffee shops, their diners, their living rooms, and have authentic conversations about what's going on out there. So that can happen just about any place in New Hampshire.
Yes, I know. All of your constituents, I always love going to New Hampshire because they always welcome all of us politicos, whether you're a lawmaker running for office or even reporters who have questions.
People usually have lots of thoughts.
Yes, they do.
Which is a healthy sign. We've got a really engaged electorate that's well-read and studied on the issues and has a lot of opinions.
Yes.
And that's a real asset, I think, for our electorate.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming. Thank you so much, and come back anytime. Next time you have another policy that you'd like to talk about.
That's great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Susan Davis. Prediction markets are increasingly popular, but they're also controversial. There's many members of Congress seeking to regulate them, and there's legal cases playing out all across the country. My next guest is former Democratic Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, and he's now the president of the Coalition for Prediction Markets. Thanks so much for being here.
Nice to be with you.
First, let's talk about the coalition. Who exactly do you represent here?
Right, well, that's a great place to start because we represent only the US-based federally regulated companies. So think Kalshi or some of the large electronic platforms like Coinbase or Robinhood and Underdog. And the common thread is that these are companies that want to play by the rules here in the US, that adhere to things like Bank Secrecy Act standards, that have know your customer requirements, that have anti-money laundering and fraud protections, that ban members of Congress from trading and have very sophisticated surveillance tools to stop market manipulation. In other words, the kinds of mature, responsible companies that believe in the integrity of US financial markets and see that as their business model. Now that's not true of everybody operating a prediction market internationally. There are shady offshore platforms that don't adhere to these rules. So the real difference is that we think we need a strong, durable federal regulatory structure. That's why we're active in Washington. That's why the coalition exists.
And right now, these markets are regulated by the CFTC, correct?
That's exactly right.
Is that the main regulatory body?
That's exactly right. Just like lots of large exchanges that are more familiar, like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange or the derivatives markets, and come under all of those same regulations and all those authorities. There's also an active rulemaking process at the CFTC right now, which is specifically directed at prediction markets. So in some ways, you know, these are derivative contracts that are not a lot different than the derivatives contracts being traded for a century now on the exchanges we know. In some ways they're different because it's another example of a financial market being democratized over the internet and having more people with access to it. And so there's some new aspects to it for sure, but a lot of it is actually a century old.
Let's talk a little bit, I feel like we should do a little viewer due diligence here. How does the prediction market work? If you're on Kalshi, what are the kind of things that people are engaging financially in? Like, how does it work for a layman?
Right, well, that's a great question because I think a lot of people have some confusion about it. You know, at the end of the day, you know, I'm a political nerd, and this really got started because some folks said there's a lot of political risk, economic risk around political outcomes, like an American presidential election.
Sure.
And people wanted to hedge that risk the way they would hedge the price of oil going up, or a foreign exchange rate, or interest rates changing. But there was no way to do that, and Kalshi in particular spent years, you know, hacking their way through the regulatory process and the US courts until they established a legal framework for doing it. And that's where they really started in a political context, which for political folks like us, you know, is a really cool use case because polls have so many problems, and along come prediction markets that provide essentially a market price for a political outcome. Who's going to win the primary in California? Who's going to be the Democratic nominee? And because it's in real time, and because there's no partisan bias, and because it's free to anyone who downloads the app, this provides a terrific layer of information for forecasting a political outcome, whether you trade or not. And of course, if you have risk against that outcome, you can hedge it the way you could hedge any other risk in any other market. And so really a prediction market is a type of derivatives market that's, you know, take the oil future market, which we hear a lot about right now. We don't have a Republican or a Democratic argument about the price of oil in the middle of the war in Iran because we all trust a market price, because you've got huge numbers of people with skin in the game, their own money, determining what's likely to happen. A lot of those people have some expertise around it, and therefore we can rely on that as being the best forecasting tool we have, free from political bias. So there are political applications for that, journalistic applications for that in an age of partisan news sources. That's pretty exciting. There's all kinds of opportunities to build income if you have expertise in, say, popular culture, who's going to win the Grammy. There's opportunities to hedge risk, as I mentioned, if you're a small business owner with exposure, say, to Chinese tariffs. You know, you can now have your own hedging program. And of course, you can buy event contracts on sporting outcomes, which is where some of the controversy arises.
Sure, we'll talk about that.
Because the casinos and sports books have had a monopoly on that up to now. And consumers love this opportunity because instead of betting against a casino that wins when you lose, they can trade on an exchange against a counterparty, and the exchange has no interest in whether they win or lose. They are trading with a counterparty who's taking the opposite side of that risk and paying a small fee to the exchange. And so the applications for sports event contracts are getting a lot of attention and are very popular, but the markets are actually much broader than that.
How many people are we talking about engaging in these markets? Because it seems like the growth has been explosive, certainly in the last year. So how many Americans, because I know your coalition represents domestic companies, how many people in this country are engaging in these markets?
Oh, it's safely tens of millions. And depending on how you count it, whether you're actually, you got the app on your phone, say a Kalshi app where you're actively trading, or whether you're just watching the data on, MSNBC or CNBC. I know all my friends around here running for office, running for governor. They're sending around their Kalshi odds to their donors, saying, "Look, I'm going to do well." They're not sending out polls. So, those people in some ways are participating in prediction markets as well. The active traders would be still very large, but smaller. And the growth, as you point out, has been extraordinary, and that's because tens of millions of Americans find these tools really useful.
Let's talk about some of the controversies. I think there's two issues right now regarding prediction markets that I think are very much in the conversation. One being this issue of insider trading, which has kind of a broad meaning in this context. As you well know, there was a active duty soldier indicted earlier this year by the Justice Department because he had placed bets in prediction markets regarding the outcome of the arrest of Venezuela President Maduro. We should note he has pled not guilty in that case. But it does seem to be one of those cases that exposes how there's so many things within the realm of national security, here we are sitting in Washington, that people could make bets around that, one, raise not only legal issues, national security issues, but maybe ethical issues in government.
Well, right. So a couple of things to say about that. First, I served on the House Intelligence Committee here for years, and I care a lot about those national security issues. The trade you're mentioning, the Maduro trade, happened on an offshore platform.
Yes.
And because of the technology used in that platform and because they don't adhere to U.S. standards, that is a much more fraught environment. In fact, most of the, if not all of the major scandals you've heard about that have gotten a lot of attention have happened at those offshore platforms. So that's why at the outset, when I say I represent the onshore federally regulated guys, it's not just a slogan, it means we've got know your customer rules. We ban insider trading. We're gonna know who did it, and we're gonna report them to law enforcement if it's suspicious. We're gonna surveil the users and use list matching up front, so we're gonna stop people in Congress from betting on relevant contracts, or if you're an athlete or you're a trainer or you're working for a sports team, you're already gonna be banned up front. But if you engage in the inappropriate use of insider information, well, what is important is that company have the surveillance tools, have the know your customer rules, report you to law enforcement. And let's remember, insider trading is illegal, it's been illegal, it's gonna be illegal tomorrow. National security information, is protected by law. Yeah. You're going to go to jail if you misuse it. I didn't sell secrets to the Chinese when I was on the House Intelligence Committee because there was a different, way to break that law. I mean, the point is you don't do it because you love your country and because there are serious penalties if you don't. Those still exist. You're right that it's very important that the markets have the kind of integrity that the users rely on and that we all count on for things like secrets that keep our country safe. My guys who are based in the U.S. and who adhere to, say, Bank Secrecy Act standards do what every other market with integrity does to guard against the misuse of insider information, and it's always going to be a struggle in any financial market to make sure that bad people aren't trying to get an unfair advantage. What I can tell you is that we don't want to push people to offshore platforms where those standards and protections don't exist. And that'll be exactly what happens if you don't regulate at the federal level here.
But that's also, to me, what's interesting about this is this sort of gray area of inside information, because you brought up pop culture, which I think is a good example. If I'm a producer on a reality show that's concluded, and I know who won the reality show, like there's soft bets about things that are going to happen in our pop culture and entertainment. I don't think that's illegal to necessarily make a bet on that, but one would say it might be unethical that people could have information that the public doesn't have, that there's a way to use these systems to make a buck.
Right. Well, the first line of defense on that is to stop contracts that are highly susceptible to manipulation. Those are often called micro bets. And they're called micro bets because that would be something like, is the next pitch going to be a ball or a strike? A macro bet would be who's going to win the game, or who's going to win the series, or who's going to win the championship. Much harder to manipulate, bigger market. And indeed, CFTC just recently, in their proposed new rule on this, has taken a very dim view of micro bets, and that's good. Our folks don't offer micro bets because of exactly the reason you mentioned, which is that you can't have certain types of contracts that are so easily subject to manipulation. And here's the point. Our guys depend on the integrity of the markets for their business model. So they're aligned with efforts to stop these type of bets that can undermine that integrity. Now, even in the context of the example you gave, that person may have a responsibility to protect that information. They're almost certainly signing a non-disclosure agreement. So they are misusing material non-public information for financial gain. They probably have a serious legal liability on that. It's a factual determination whether they're committing a crime. And so it's not like there aren't penalties, and it's not like that people don't know when they're using company information or insider information improperly. But the best thing we're going to do is have the types of contracts that are less susceptible to that manipulation. That's what you're going to get on US-based exchanges.
There is a provision that was recently put into the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Bill, directing the Secretary Hegseth, to do essentially a general order, a ban on service members using prediction markets. Does your coalition support that?
Yeah, look, we support all these type of efforts that are going to be reinforcing what we already do, right? And so you can't trade on one of my platforms, if you're in a sensitive government position on a contract that you might have information on. What the scope and reach of that is, whether every member of the multi-million person military should be prevented from ever participating in prediction market. I don't know what's fair and what's not on that. I think what is absolutely important is that people not be using sensitive information for financial gain, and that's true of members of Congress, and that's true for members of the military, and we do have some laws about this already. Let's remember, it's not like we have to invent them all, but I do think there's a balance to strike there, just as we do with a lot of things with our military service members around where their individual lives start and their official duties encroach on that. But I think it's a simple question around national security information or around senior government officials misusing information they get through their jobs. That's already banned on our platforms, and we support efforts in the Congress to write it into law.
Let's talk about sports betting, because this feels like the other big issue at play. A lot of states that have legalized gambling and sports betting, they don't like your prediction markets.
Right.
There's efforts to ban these in certain states, to regulate them differently. Considering that a lot of these markets are used to make sports predictions, what's the argument that this isn't sports betting?
Right. Well, I spent enough time in Washington to know that you have to look behind some of those arguments and understand who's pushing them. You've got a casino monopoly out there that wants to protect that monopoly. And let's remember, there's a big difference between casinos and prediction markets. Casinos win when you lose. We all know this. You walk in, they take your money, you play a game. You may play for an hour, you may play for 2 hours. I always walk out with no money if I go to a casino.
Same.
I don't do it a lot. Yeah, me neither. There's a reason, because I'm not good at it. But I know that their whole way to make money is to take my money. That's not true on prediction markets. On prediction markets, you and I are engaging as counterparties through the medium of an exchange that has no interest in whether we win or lose. And so the casinos are worried that millions of Americans are choosing this other model. It's better for the consumer, and they don't like it. And that's just so if there's members of Congress who are trying to ban prediction markets from casino-heavy states, well, I think that may be one reason. There are also, concerns in Indian country on Indian gaming and whether this will affect that. I'm very sensitive to that. I think there's been huge progress made in Indian country through the Indian Gaming Act and other measures. But let's remember that there is absolutely no competition between prediction markets and 95% of the revenue that Indian tribes typically garner from casino gaming, because casino games aren't on prediction markets. 80% of casino revenue is not going to be affected by prediction markets, traditional games. The only overlap we're talking about here are sports event contracts, All right, so if you can do sports betting at a casino or in a sports book, you can as a consumer go into a business that wins when you lose. I mean, a sports book kicks you off, for goodness sake, if you win too much. I mean, that's remarkable when you think about it. Casinos literally have a business model that requires you to lose. Or consumers can have a choice between doing that on the outcome of the Giants game or another sports contract by buying an event contract on a prediction market. And by the tens of millions, they clearly prefer that. So what we believe is that the important thing is to have consumer protections, to have integrity, to keep these companies here, playing by the rules in the US, but to give consumers the choice about how they want to do that type of sports event contract. And that's really the only disagreement. But those monopolies have a lot of power, and they're making their voices heard here.
Isn't also part of it too, again, it maybe just comes down to a revenue question. You're taxed differently. Like sports winnings are taxed at a higher rate, and I can see a lot of states looking at prediction markets and thinking, hey, we should be making more money off of these.
Well, and there's some efforts to do that, and I think the companies I represent are realistic that taxes are a fact of life. It's not like our customers don't pay taxes; they do. There's going to be the usual debate in Washington between Republicans and Democrats about how much you want to tax financial markets. That's above my pay grade. But yeah, of course, and that's normal, as it should be. Some of this stuff is getting worked through because these are relatively new markets. But here's an important point. The American Gaming Association, the casinos, the big casinos, they've had a 20% increase in their revenue and profits this year. There is no money being lost by the traditional gaming industry. There is an expansion into a new type of financial innovation, a new derivatives market that is allowing millions of people to participate in sports event contracts and lots of other stuff in a different way. And casinos are trying to stop it because they want to protect their monopoly. Got it. But I don't know why the consumer should care about that.
I have two questions for you. One is philosophical, and one is a little bit practical. I have a quote from Senator Chris Murphy. As I'm sure you well know, he introduced legislation to more tightly regulate what kind of contracts can be offered on these markets. And then when he announced it, he said, quote, "What happens to us spiritually when every moral question in this country just becomes a market? Don't we lose something? Don't we rot a little bit inside?"
Yeah,
do you think there's a moral rot?
I have a lot of respect for my friend Senator Murphy, but that's a little breathless. I mean, I don't know that our civilization is worse off because we have an oil futures market. I actually think it's pretty valuable and it lets people hedge and protect against those risks. I think our country's, I know it's not worse off because we've got agriculture markets and farmers can hedge risk. And by the way, we allow millions of people to speculate in those markets because that provides the liquidity so that a farmer can actually get the contract bought and sold when he needs to. Like, we know how financial markets work. The country's not going to be worse off because we've got another forecasting tool besides polling, which sucks and which is expensive and partisan and has all kinds of problems. I know people follow politics love prediction markets. Journalists are going to love prediction markets because it's a nonpartisan, neutral source of data. It's not some panacea. It's not some miracle. But these are very useful financial tools for using your expertise, for hedging your risk, for sidestepping the casino monopoly if you want to engage in sports contracts. And if his point is that we all have to be responsible in how we engage in certain types of financial markets, I mean, you bet. That's why we support, controls on micro bets that are subject to manipulation or that are the most likely to result in addiction. That's why in states like Connecticut, where they allow gaming, I'm not sure Senator Murphy has the same objection to Mohegan Sun or Foxwoods, where they follow responsible practices and make sure that there are age restrictions and that there are often self-exclusion and limits and responsible conduct adhered to. So I understand the concern that in a country dominated by our telephone, right? Like by our phones. Everything we do is on our phone, and that it can feel dizzying at times. But my goodness, the important thing is to make sure we're following our values, to write good laws and regulations, to play by the rules, and to see the consumer benefit, and then regulate and manage against the risk. And I think that's exactly what needs to happen here. I don't know what that type of hyperbole results in policy, except maybe trying to make the future stop or send financial innovation somewhere else or send American consumers overseas to shady offshore platforms, which is exactly what's going to happen, or let people keep getting fleeced at casinos, which I don't think helps anybody. So I just disagree with that.
Well, we'll leave it there. Sean Patrick Maloney, he is the president of the Coalition for Prediction Markets. I really appreciate your time. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
We have to take a very quick break, and we'll be right back. You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
Congressman Molina, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with this? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. You know, let me think about that.
Back on 535, member number 97 of the 535 who've sat with us, Brad Knott, first-term Republican from the 13th District of North Carolina, which includes parts of Raleigh, Wake County, and a really beautiful part of the state. Former federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of North Carolina, which situates you well on the House Judiciary Committee. But I want to start talking about permitting reform. It's not the first time it's come up in a Congress, but tell us what your thoughts are on permitting reform and explain what that is.
Yeah, well, there's two avenues here. The Transportation Infrastructure Committee has undertaken a pretty robust effort to streamline, I would say, fairly rudimentary permitting processes. So whether it's water infrastructure, parts of energy, some of the road build-outs, it's not rocket science. And trying to expedite the reviews and then give certainty to states, cities, and so forth, that's what we're looking for. Rather than having subjectivity with the permitting process, making it very clear-cut so that they can apply, receive it, make quick changes they need to, and then get on with their job.
What's tying it up right now?
You know, honestly, I would say the reviewing parties have a lot of discretion, and when one administration changes, that's also a major factor. But whether it's regional diversification or political diversification, there's just not a lot of certainty there. There's a lot of discretion with the individual reviewers. And then most importantly, there's not really accountability to the reviewing parties. So whatever it may be, whether it's FAA, EPA, DOT in Washington, there's not a very streamlined way to try to expedite or challenge. And inadvertently, that can incentivize dragging your feet.
Is it a regional office the administration set up to help simplify this? In years past, we've heard about the Department of Transportation, the General Services Administration, having hubs that know your area, know the contractors, know how to speed things up. Is that not helping? That
would, but again, reining in the law so that there's a little bit less discretion, again, not for firing off rockets, but for building a road. But secondly, and I'll say this, there's also fear of approving something knowing that the likelihood of having a collateral attack, even after the permit's received, is very high. So a reviewing party for the government is going to be less ready to give the permit if they believe, whether it's an environmental challenge or a local challenge, they don't want to have their name on the permit saying we approved this project that's going to be challenged.
So you have to explain to your constituents when you go back to them that, hey, I'm working on permitting reform for you. But you have to characterize it a different way, I suspect, to make it resonate with them. How do you champion this at home, and how do you champion this with colleagues who don't have a sense of the issue?
Right. Well, in reverse order, it is interesting. With my legal background, I know how heavily stacked the deck is against the folks wanting to build. If they come across a challenge, there really aren't too many avenues that they can exercise, even when they're in the right. And that's what's so hard to navigate. But in terms of selling it to my district, there are many examples that regulatory overreach, regulatory uncertainty has caused real harm. And being able to point to the harm inflicted on the district, on people in North Carolina, that's a very tangible way to say this is wrong, we're trying to fix it. We're not getting rid of regulatory authority, but the regulator can't take your livelihood without any cost. There needs to be a more of a rebalancing effort, and that's what we're trying to do.
In past Congresses, one of the biggest surrogates for permitting reform was actually a Democrat. It was Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who had his own needs for permitting reform in a state with this heavy energy production.
That's right.
How do you find Democrats to join you on this? What do you do to pull that string and get them to join you?
It's very interesting. One of the things I hate about Washington is when the cameras turn on, there is a very real uptick in division.
More so than ever.
And one thing that I've really appreciated is when the camera goes off, establishing relationships with Democrats. And one person in particular that I really enjoy talking about solutions to problems is Jamie Raskin. He's about as far left as he can be in some respects, but he was very affirming to some of my ideas on permitting reform. And we just filed a bill that I ran by him called the Lego Act. And it deals with essentially bringing a defense to the regulated parties that if they meet that barrier, regardless of a technicality, they can go forward. And he was all for that. He was very affirming. Now, whether or not he supports it publicly, I don't know. But instead of the nature of that bill is, instead of being caught up in the spiderweb of Washington, D.C. administrative courts, the regulated party can say, I think I'm doing this just right. I want to hear it in my district in a federal court before a jury of my peers.
The LEGO Act, explain the acronym, spell it out, and give us some
Limited
detail.
Excessive Government Overreach
It
Act.
provides more of a safety net for parties who may be challenged by federal administration
That's right.
agencies.
So an example that was in my district, there was a tobacco farm that was in existence and operational before North Carolina was an official state. There's a road on the southern end of a field. It had been there for over 2 centuries. Someone in the previous administration came down there and said, this field violates the WOTUS Act because of its proximity to a river. And the
Waters of the United States.
Yes, that's right. And he had no ability to fight it. He's a middle class, honest, wonderful man. He can't afford $500,000 or $1 million to come up to Washington to challenge that halt in a court that's funded by the EPA. And so what my bill would do would for the farmer to say, thank you for your opinion, I'm going to keep farming, and if you want to stop me, we're going to go have an argument in a district court where I can make the case to a jury of my peers that this is a reasonable use of the farmland that does not impact the water of the United States. And if he is able to meet that reasonableness standard, he can keep farming.
And that would be in that farmer's home district?
Yep, the Eastern District of North Carolina would be where this particular farm was.
For your constituents,
that's right.
Under the LEGO Act, it would be you go to your local federal courthouse,
that's right.
So not to incur the burden of travel, transportation,
yes.
And cost.
And your neighbors will decide this is really not worth punishing him for.
Let's talk a bit about the Judiciary Committee. As a former federal prosecutor, you're one of multiple, I think Congressman Ivey of Maryland's former federal prosecutor. You're a former federal prosecutor.
That's right.
What do you think the federal prosecutor's offices need right now, the U.S. attorney's offices around the country? You have a unique visibility on that, and I suspect your colleagues would like to know that.
Yes. That's a great question. I think that there should be a sort of a decentralizing effort from the Department of Justice in Washington, not get rid of it, but really pump out into the various U.S. attorney's offices and law enforcement offices, because that's where most people will be affected.
94 of them, right?
Do what?
94 of those offices, right? Yep.
And that effort, it could lead to more law enforcement officers. There's a program called the Task Force Program, where a local officer can have cross-jurisdictional authorization just by becoming a task force officer with DEA, ATF. Some of the most robust and well-stewarded efforts are empowering local law enforcement to help their communities. And if we can give, a bigger boost to recruit prosecutors, to train prosecutors, again, locally, not here, but farm them out from every corner of the country, I think that we'll be better served long term, because again, that's where you prosecute crime, that's where you handle local disputes. Beefing up the farming out is what I think we ought to be doing.
A bit of a decentralization
to
get more local participation.
Yes.
Do you have concerns over what the Judiciary Committee has reported out about some turnover in the Department of Justice. We've lost thousands of attorneys. A number of your former colleagues are gone. DOJ, forks in the road, maybe disagreements politically with the prior administration or the current administration. Do we have enough bodies in the building?
You know, we probably have enough bodies, but it is a real problem because you lose the seasoning of experience. And I actually was promoted. I came in under Obama. When Trump won the election, a lot of folks left. So that enabled me to rise up, probably faster than I should have, honestly. I exercised the opportunity well, but the public needs to have the assurances that the Justice Department is apolitical. And I find it imperative for each party to really focus on delivering that to the public. Because in my personal opinion, there is no more important department in Washington than the Justice Department if it is perceived as apolitical. Once you start politicizing justice, you don't have justice. And 25, 30 years ago, the department was sort of the bellwether and the example on how to be apolitical. And getting back to that point should be our main focus.
What do you think about the idea that some of your colleagues bring up, including Senator Grassley? What do you think about cameras in the courtroom? You were in those courtrooms. You were making arguments. Would you have liked the cameras to have been in there? Not an easy question.
It's not. I can see the reason behind it, but I'm not sure that publicizing it is necessarily what needs to happen because in many respects, I believe that would add political pressure. One of the things that I found most becoming to the system is the jury trial. You cut out all the noise, there's firm rules of procedure, and you get to speak to 12 people. And if a judge knows what he or she is doing, they will limit that presentation to very tightly construed relevant evidence. And usually, if I was doing my job, I would let the evidence be presented in a way that told the truth and let the jury do with it with what they will. And if we allowed cameras to in the courtroom, I think you would have a lot of punditry, a lot of, especially the big cases where you don't need to have political interference. I think we would run the risk of overly politicizing even the local court systems.
The people who appreciate the beauty of the jury system are not just prosecutors and defense attorneys, but anybody who's ever served on a jury recognizes this is a pretty damn good system we actually have here. It really does.
And it's
function.
uniquely American.
It's uniquely American.
That's right.
We have a few minutes left. Tell us about the North Carolina 13th. Paint a picture for folks as to your district.
North Carolina 13th is one of the, it's unique in this respect. We have, again, like I referenced earlier, tobacco farms, cotton farms, sweet potato farms that lead the nation but have been in existence before North Carolina. And then we've got
colonial era stuff.
Truly. And then we have some of the newest, most robust, whether it's kind of in the biopharma space, the technology space. We've got Fortune 10 companies investing there.
It's part of that research triangle.
Yeah, part of the research triangle. And my district is kind of fielding the new burst of growth because Raleigh, Chapel Hill, Durham, they've kind of been overly built. And so ours is a natural bleed over that houses it. We've got a great tax policy, we've got a great regulatory climate. So the building and the development is just at a robust pace. So you've got the brand new, and you've got, I would say, as North Carolina as it can be, all into one. And the people there are just fantastic. And so I'm blessed to serve them. I'm honored to serve them. And it's an exciting time in NC-13.
And the best place to get food is what?
There's a place in Johnston County, which is sort of a main county in the district, called the White Swan. And it's a classic Southern cooking, barbecue, fried chicken, been there forever, sort of a mainstay. And the owner of that restaurant is a guy named Linwood Parker. And he's just sort of into everything in that part of the state. And it's about as North Carolina as it can be.
You're not going to go out of business serving barbecue and fried chicken and food that makes everybody feel good.
That's right.
Congressman Brad Knott, North Carolina's 13th. Congratulations on your first term. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Harriet Hageman of Wyoming is up next. I'm Scott McFarland. This is 535 News.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
Afghanistan. The IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there and 5 of us or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family, because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
When your child gets sick, time is everything. Getting treatment sooner means more options and a real chance at getting better. Thankfully, almost every new treatment for cancer is available here. And because of strong American leadership, we get these new medicines first. But that can change fast. In other countries, many are told to wait or go without. If Washington copies other countries' policies, we'll have to wait too. It's time to tell Washington, keep America in the lead.
Back in the Cannon Rotunda on 535, my teammate Brody Mullins joining me. So too is Wyoming Republican Harriet Hageman, who represents one of the biggest districts in America, I suppose, the entire state of Wyoming, which I want to talk to you later about how you can do constituent services when you have that much real estate to cover. I want to start off on the topic of data centers, though. It's been part of our conversation here this week. You have a distinctive data center issue in Wyoming that you are trying to conduct some oversight of, a contamination, which we hear in communities east to west. They're worried about contamination. What's going on in Wyoming?
So this is something that just recently arose, or at least that we just recently found out about, but apparently earlier this year, the allegation is that one of the data centers contaminated the gray water system. And so they've been removed off of that system. When we found out about it, we immediately contacted the company. They responded to us within 24 hours. They had a phone call to my staff, and we have been working with them to try to figure out exactly what happened here. And I know that they are working with the Board of Public Utilities as well to address it, to trace it back to the source and figure out how to make sure that this never happens again.
See the company's statement arguing that this is not a health hazard or a danger to the community, but this sure does reinforce the fears people have about these expanding data centers.
I agree with that, and one of the things that I have continuously pointed out is that Wyoming has a procedure to make sure that we are assessing the full impact of big businesses or big industries such as data centers. We have what's called the Industrial Siting Council, and that is a statutory framework that was set up many years ago, and the purpose of it is that when you have a large industry coming into your community, and especially in a state like Wyoming, because we're the least populated state in the nation. Our largest city is 60,000 people, so you can imagine if you've got a big industry coming in, what it can do in terms of housing, roads, the restaurant demands, what you're going to do for the short-term construction employees versus how many long-term employees. So the structure that we have set up is they're supposed to be looking at all of those things to make sure that there are no negative impacts on the surrounding community. I am encouraging the people in Wyoming to use that state process more effectively. And I think that even in the legislature, they're potentially looking at some ways to tweak that. So yes, there are many concerns related to energy demand as well as the impact on our water supply.
As the least populous state in America with no real population density, do data center companies see that as an opportunity, that there's space and real estate to play with?
There's several things. One of them is just exactly that. We're at the crossroads of I-80 and I-25. And then also we're cool. So where I live in Cheyenne, it's 6,000 feet in elevation. So I don't have air conditioning in my house because we don't really need it except for maybe a couple weeks out of the year. So it's cool. And so because electricity is one of the biggest expense items that they have, they want to keep those costs down in terms of the cooling. So that's another reason why they're looking to relocate in a place like Wyoming.
You also had a briefing today on a bill that you've just recently introduced that tries to combat affordability. Tell us about that.
So it is the Stop the Climate Shakedowns Act, and what this has to do with is that there are many communities and states around the country that have either filed lawsuits against our energy companies claiming that they are responsible for climate change and the impacts of climate change, and this is an effort to try, really it's another way of taxation is really what these communities are doing, the states are doing. So they've either adopted Superfund laws claiming that producing energy has caused climate change, and so those energy producers should be responsible for paying billions upon billions upon billions of dollars in fines. And then on the other hand, they're just flat out suing. So the city of Boulder, Colorado has a lawsuit pending in front of the United States Supreme Court right now against Suncor. So the purpose of my legislation, and I filed this in conjunction with Senator Ted Cruz, is to stop these lawsuits in their tracks. These Boulder and the radical left and the radical environmentalists, the activists, they cannot get things that Congress and their state legislators are not adopting things such as cap and trade or carbon taxes or the things that they want. So this is their way of generating revenue. This is just another tax that they're attempting to impose. You know, it's going to go against the oil and gas companies, the coal companies, the mineral producers, but in reality, the consumers are the ones that are ultimately going to suffer dramatically because it's going to make the cost of everything absolutely skyrocket if they were ever successful in one of these cases.
At the same time, you do support other efforts to combat climate change. Can you tell us about those?
Pardon me?
At the same time, you do support other efforts to try to combat climate change. Can you tell us about some of your other efforts?
I think that the UN just recently released a report demonstrating that most of their modeling data over the last 20 to 30 years was completely corrupted. I don't know if you realize, but in 2021, they actually released a report saying that most of the data and information they had been relying upon to make their predictions were actually scenarios that were never going to happen. So the UN has admitted that that we're going to have these horrific consequences associated with climate change most likely will not happen. The other problem that you have with so much of the climate discussion is that it is based upon corrupted data. For example, they completely ignore the urban heat index. They completely, they homogenize data between weather stations and different things. So much of the data on which they've been basing their models and their claims really has been corrupted. And I think that we need to take a step back, look at the reality of the situation, and recognize that, number one, we're able to adapt to almost anything, but number two, the dire predictions they've been making are not going to be happening.
How do you build a bridge to Democrats on your bill? Democrats who would not characterize themselves as extremists or enviro activists, who would acknowledge there's some connection, they believe, between utilities, energy production, and climate change.
Sure, and what it comes down to is affordability. What you have to look at is opportunity costs, right? Are you going to invest $1 trillion in taxation of these kinds of lawsuits and just spend it essentially turning this into a mechanism to generate revenue for communities? Or do you look at things like affordability and adaptability? If they were successful in these lawsuits, a gallon of gasoline is going to absolutely skyrocket. Heating your home is going to skyrocket. Being able to fly in an airplane is going to skyrocket. The thing that the other part of this is pure due process and fairness. Every single one of our energy companies that are producing the resources that we use for air conditioning, for heat, for traffic lights, for building our highways, etc., they've done so pursuant to permits. Every single thing they've done has been perfectly legal. So this is a retroactive look back and say, well, in 1994 you were producing oil at a rate of so many barrels a day. Therefore, we think that you're responsible for X amount of climate change, and we're going to impose a tax against you of $45 billion. What do you think that is going to do to, number one, our energy companies? Would they even survive it? And number two, how much are they going to charge us for the resource that we need to survive? So
you make an affordability argument in your outreach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is about affordability. This is about fairness. It's about constitutionality. It's about whether one state has the authority to essentially impose a tax against a business in another state, claiming that at some point 100 years down the road there's going to be an impact for a decision that they made in 1994, as an example.
There's another big fight going on right now on permitting reform, which I think part of what your bill kind of plays into permitting reform in terms of speeding up projects or not slowing them down.
Yes.
Talk about where this bill stands. The House has passed a number of versions. The
We
Senate
have.
is stuck.
We have. One of them is the SPEED Act, and a lot of that has to do with the modernization of NEPA. NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, Federal Land Policy Management Act. So many of these regulatory regimes and these environmental statutes went into effect 50 years ago. I support them, but at the same time, things have changed so dramatically in the intervening 50 years in terms of how we gather data, what we know about mitigation of these projects, what we know in terms of vegetation management, what we've done in terms of emission control. The situation now in terms of the pollution that we have in America as compared to 50 years ago is dramatically different. What we can do with modeling, what we can do in terms of our knowledge related to wildlife management. So my discussion around this is really focused on modernizing these statutes so that they actually reflect the modern age in the way that we gather data, the way that we manage resources, the types of demands that we have, the equipment that we use, all of that. It is time to be looking at all of these and making sure that they're working for our modern industries and our modern commerce. All of those things. So that's why the SPEED Act is in the Senate right now. I'm hoping that that will pass. And then we're also doing some work in the Natural Resources Committee on modernizing the Endangered Species Act, again, for the same reason.
You think there's time in the Senate to get this done? It seems like it. Is there time in the Senate? The problem is if Democrats take the House or the Senate, this permit reform issue is not going to get much.
So my understanding is they are still moving forward with the permitting modernization in the Senate. And I am checking on it on a very regular basis. And the reports that I'm getting is that they're tweaking it, they're working at it, they're trying to make sure that there is bipartisan support for these efforts. So one of the things to keep in mind about the SPEED Act is it is entirely project agnostic. So it will help in terms of wind development, solar development, oil and gas development, permitting for coal. It is for uranium mining and nuclear development. It is project agnostic. It is a way for these projects to be able to navigate the permitting process effectively and more quickly.
Part of this fight is between the fossil fuel producers and Democrats who support renewable fuel. Your state has both, right? You're big wind and you're big lots of coal.
Well, that's why it's project agnostic. So it's not really even a battle between them. Many of the wind projects have also been dramatically slowed down because of the permitting requirements. So it would apply to pipelines, it would apply to wind, it would apply to solar, it would apply to other developments. The thing is, we're kind of on the cusp of a lot of different things in terms of being able to produce energy in this country. We want to make sure that we continue to be innovative and that we remain at the forefront on these incredibly exciting issues.
I'm going to transition to talk about the law. You're a longtime attorney. You bring that skill set here to the U.S. House. You've been pressing in a bipartisan way for looking at AI adaptive technology in courtrooms. Explain what that is and why that might be an advancement.
So there's a couple of things. One is as a trial attorney for many years, one of the most critically important things that you have to have is an accurate transcript. That transcript has to be 100% accurate, whether you're doing a deposition or you're sitting in a live courtroom with live testimony. You can't have somebody say, I did not see the red light, and have it come out in the transcript saying, I did see the red light. And that one 3-letter word is astoundingly important. So one of the bills that I've introduced is to make sure that because AI is taking over so many different things, and I am concerned that to the extent they want to place that in the courtroom setting, that we make sure that it is entirely 100% accurate, because we know right now it isn't. So we need to be doing pilot projects. We need to make sure that our court reporters are able to be a part of this discussion and engaged with it, because there is nothing that is more important really in a court case than that transcript, both deposition and in the live testimony. The other thing that I've done in another area of AI is I'm terribly concerned about censorship in the First Amendment. And I have introduced a bill, it's a First Amendment bill, to make it so that the government cannot use AI to suppress our freedom of speech.
By filtering it?
Yes, by filtering it, manipulating it, distorting the kind of information that we're able to receive, making sure that if the federal government is going to be putting information out, that it is entirely accurate, that they're not using AI to basically push us in one direction or push us in another direction. So really it is an effort to make sure that our government is not manipulating us through AI and suppressing or hindering our ability to communicate.
There have been political accusations of filtering of social media in recent years, in past years, and there have been generations ago ideas that the government was putting a heavy hand on information that gets out. Your legislation is trying to make it, I suppose, completely benign in terms of how they allow stuff to go through AI.
So the thing is that the federal government cannot do through a proxy what it cannot do directly. And under the First Amendment, we have the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, to peaceably assemble and petition our government for redress. Really, all 5 of those were dramatically trampled on during COVID. And one of the things that I kept screaming at the top of my lungs about was that there is no COVID exemption under the First Amendment. So I have 2 bills. One is the First Amendment Accountability Act, and that is that if any federal employee violates our First Amendment rights, telling us we can't go to church, taking away our freedom of speech, which we know that they did, they were suppressing information using Google and Meta. They've all admitted that the federal government, the Biden administration, was suppressing speech surrounding COVID, surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop.
How do you account for misinformation then? If somebody's using it to corrupt the system, should the government have a role in at least keeping the corruption out?
Well, I think that the free market system works about that, but what I'll say is I'm worried about the government doing that. So that's the free market side of things, but I don't want the federal government doing it because we have a First Amendment that prohibits it. So that's what I'm focused on, is that it is very difficult to bring a First Amendment lawsuit against a federal employee. What my 2 bills do is if you're a federal employee and you use AI to manipulate me or manipulate my speech in some way, I can sue you for damages, seeking injunctive relief and attorney's fees. And the same one with the First Amendment Accountability Act is if you're going to suppress my speech, I'm going to sue you, I can sue you, and I can get damages in an injunction.
Sticking with AI for another moment, you said before you travel hundreds of miles every weekend seeing your constituents all around your enormous district. What are people saying about AI? Are they worried about it?
People are worried about AI. People are worried about a lot of technological advances. We're really in a very strange moment in time. I think many of us realize that things are advancing so quickly. 5 years ago, what we're seeing now, nobody was even necessarily thinking about, and then here we are, and it's almost exponential. And so everybody's concerned about it. How are we going to continue communicating? What is happening to our young people? Are they online too much? What is YouTube doing? What is TikTok? I mean, there are just so many things that there are to worry about. We need to stay ahead of it. One of the things that I keep saying to my colleagues from the standpoint of legislating, we tend to legislate, we hardwire something in place, and then as technology advances and changes, we're always behind. So I'm constantly advocating for putting sunsets or reauthorization requirements in any kind of a tech bill so that 3 to 5 years down the road, we are forced to revisit whether we need to change the law, whether we need to catch up with where the technology is. You know, an example is FISA. FISA has to be reauthorized, well, now every 3 years. But that allowed us 2 years ago to go in and make 56 fundamental changes to FISA to make sure that the federal government could no longer spy on us the way that the FBI had been doing. So having that reauthorization requirement allowed us to course correct in real time almost and actually make sure we're protecting civil liberties at the same time we're able to gather the data that we need.
I know you're a few years into this, but have you gotten used to this commute yet? Because Cheyenne to Washington's a unique challenge.
It is. I drive 100 miles to Denver and mostly and catch the plane.
I-25.
Yep. Every once in a while I will fly out of Cheyenne, but then I have to find my way home again when I get back. I'm used to driving, though.
Fair enough. Harriet Hageman, thank you for giving us so much time.
Thank
it's a
you.
busy week, and we're really grateful for that.
Thank you.
Coming up tomorrow on 5:35, Kat Kamick's going to join us to talk about big tech. We have Greg Stanton of Arizona talking about FEMA resources, and the retiring Steve Womack to talk about efforts to try to curb the federal deficit in his remaining months here. Brody Mullins for our whole team. I'm Scott McFarland. Remember, if it's important to the 535, it's important to us. Thanks for watching.